Welcome to the Food Dad Podcast with Pete and Bryan. Podcast with Pete and Bryan. Podcast with Pete and Bryan. Podcast with Welcome to the Food Dad Podcast with Pete and Bryan. Podcast with Pete and Bryan. Podcast with Pete and Bryan. Podcast with Welcome to.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Full Dad Podcast. I am Bryan.
And I'm Pete. And this week's guest is Tinoy Kashif. Is that the exact pronunciation? I realized I should have asked the pronunciation of your last name beforehand.
Oh, it's Kashif.
Oh, Kashif.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Masai's my son.
Oh, that's right. Oh my God. You know what? Let's record that.
I'm good with that. Tinoy Masai works for me.
I was like, wait, I didn't hear that when you introduced him. So it's Tinoy.
Tinoy. Yeah.
Tinoy. Mm-hmm. Okay. Can you
Tinoy. Tinoy.
Okay. Tinoy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well, welcome, Tinoy.
I appreciate you having me
to the podcast.
Absolutely.
We probably don't need to do a reintro. I think that was pretty cool. Yeah. We'll leave it at
that.
I
mean, I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's all fun. It's. I think we're good. So, well, listen. Welcome to the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here. Nice meeting you. So why don't we get just a little background information? Why don't you just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, and we'll take it from there, man.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys having me on and welcoming me to the space. My name is Tinoy Kashif. I'm a born and bred New Yorker from the Bronx.
BX.
100%. Born and raised in it. I'm the youngest of 5 siblings, and I think, I always like to share that because it gives some context to who I am as a person. I was the oops baby. So my next closest sibling is 9 years older than me, but I was also born on my oldest brother's 18th birthday. So that gives you a little bit of range. Yeah, absolutely. So I was telling Bryan earlier, it was interesting, right? Kind of growing up with 4 additional parents as opposed to really close siblings. So a large family really kind of shaped who I am. My mother was an educator, didn't grow up with dad, kind of in and out of incarceration, typical New York City Bronx story. But because of that, my mother's taught middle school special ed for 33 years. And then subsequently, I was in Catholic school my whole life. So 2 different sides of the spectrum, try to make sure education was hyper important. Went to school in Connecticut, really thought I was going to go and, work in HR and kind of do the HR route. And when I came out of school, I got a job in retail, just needed something part-time to kind of work on. And I was like, you know what? I'm actually really good at this. And so now I'm a retail professional. I've been working in luxury houses for the last 10 years. I currently manage a boutique on Madison Avenue. Met my wife in the early 2010s. She moved here for grad school, and I was able to snatch her up at a nightclub. I was telling Pete, we actually just drove past the original nightclub where I met her at. So really fun kind of New York story there. And then in 2016, we got married, and in 2018, we had our son Masai. So really interesting kind of learning how to raise a biracial child in New York City, which is probably one of the easier places to do it. But that's kind of our journey here today. And, now I'm excited to kind of continue this kind of dad conversation. And so again, thanks for having me here.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how old is your son?
He'll be 7 March 1st.
March 1st. Masai is his name?
Masai, correct. So if you're familiar with the tribe, so when my wife and I did our honeymoon, we originally went to South Africa. So we did Johannesburg, we did Cape Town, had a wonderful time there, and then we went on safari in Kenya and Tanzania. So in East Africa, there's actually the Maasai tribe that's there. Most people are familiar with them when you see the photos or the videos of the tribe jumping.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So he's named directly after that tribe, which is also, if you're a basketball fan, Masai Ujiri is the general manager for the Toronto Raptors. So it's a name that's kind of been around there, but that's where the etymology of it comes from.
That's awesome.
And I mean, I know this, but I know you had mentioned that your son is biracial. Maybe you can elaborate on that. Like what ethnic background do you guys?
Oh, yes. I totally missed that. Yes. My wife is Filipino. She was born here. She's the youngest of 3 girls, raised kind of in, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, more of a suburban lifestyle. So it's interesting in the 2 families. You have one family that's strictly from, the cities of New York, and you have another family that is Asian, but from an immigrant family raised in the suburbs. So really 2 different kind of backgrounds, but it really helps kind of inform who he is today. And you'll see a lot of that, you know, as we discuss further, his personality come out in with kind of both of those backgrounds.
And you said your family's from Connecticut?
So they're originally from Pennsylvania. They moved to Pennsylvania, but my wife's dad is now retired, but he was an anesthesiologist.
Got it.
So in the medical field, you kind of go where the work is. So he was in Connecticut for a little bit. He had a practice in Pennsylvania. And then for a large portion of when I knew my wife, he was actually working on the western side of Pennsylvania. So he was there for Monday or Sunday night through Friday, would drive home. And then the weekends, he was back in the eastern side of Pennsylvania. So we would go down and kind of see them on the weekend. And that's when we had that time together.
Awesome.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a interesting New York coupling. I mean,
Oh, I'm telling you.
and originally, like, and for you, what's your ethnic background? Of course, I know, like, you're a black man, but
Yes.
before,
Yeah, so I'm American, right? As far as I know, I'm American. But when we traced our roots back with my grandfather and things like that, we have some roots rooted back in Barbados. But you know, that's a larger conversation.
Yeah.
But you know, we kind of lose some of those roots living here for a long amount of time, especially with kind of like segregation and slavery.
course,
That kind of, you know, those stories aren't always passed down as clean as they could be. So for me, we identify as like American, but I do have some Bayesian roots, which is really nice to kind of, especially when it comes back to the food.
of course, Caribbean food is off the hook.
Oh my goodness, I love it all. I love it all. So, but yeah, so we, you know, part of that culture is really trying to identify, you know, what ends up getting passed down on both sides. So although, you know, in the scope of this room, we identify as kind of biracial, part of our teachings, in our household at least, is we never tell Masai that he's half of anything, right? You're fully black, you're fully Filipino. However, you'd have two really vibrant and beautiful cultures to pull from.
Yeah.
You know, and there's going to be rooms and spaces in the Asian/Filipino community where they're going to say you're not enough, right? Eventually you'll cross that bridge. There's currently, of course, we know there's going to be rooms in the black community where they're going to say you're not black enough. And so right now with a 6.5, almost 7-year-old, one of the things that's really high on our list is instilling the fact that you're never half of anything, right? You're fully invited into all the spaces. You know, my son knows a little bit of Tagalog, and so, you know, you can get by with that. But, you know, at the end of the day, speaking the language doesn't necessarily mean the culture. And for us, experience is really, really important. So part of the reason why we commit to traveling, and travel is something that's huge in our family and we love it, right? And so we went to the Philippines and we actually did his 5th birthday there.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was, I'm telling you guys, if you haven't been yet, make that on the list of trips that are down the line. It's absolutely incredible. But what was nice about that, right? Our first trip there with the full family is our intention was to go there while his grandparents were still able to maneuver, right? Age is a thing. We understand that. But also to get to see, even though you don't look apples to apples like everybody there, this is your culture, period. Right. So when you look at your mom, this is your mom's culture. This is that side of it. And so there's something to be said about speaking towards it. But I think it's super powerful when you're able to give children that experience to kind of live it. Right. And so while we were there, we were, you know, eating at all the local Filipino spots. We went to a couple of the fancier ones, but really we tried to make the trip around seeing family, experiencing the culture, going to the local markets, because you know, when you have those experiences, it helps you kind of identify, you know, this is who I am. And that was really important for us.
You mentioned that he speaks a little the Filipino language Tagalog.
Tagalog.
So does what language is being primarily spoken at home?
Ooh, I love that question. So I was actually explaining this to your wife, and this will kind of go down a rabbit hole a little bit. So when Masai was born, you know, we needed to find a bit of care, right? And so our first nanny that we found was actually Colombian. So my wife found her during one of the mommy blogs. We found another family who they were Ecuadorian and Puerto Rican, and then our nanny was Colombian. So the two kids, we would bring him to the house, watch the two kids together. So his first formal language was actually Spanish.
That's funny.
And so he has a lot of pride in it. You know, our nanny's mother, he still calls abuela. We FaceTime her. She moved back to Colombia, and we're really close with that side of the family. And so as he got a little bit older, we live in Astoria. Astoria is hyper diverse. And, you know, there's a park that we used to go to all the time. And then one day we took the same route home every single day. And it was maybe a week after we started looking for preschools. We decided to randomly take one block further. And as we were walking, there was a preschool that was opening up. It said, it worked with our hours, financials worked. And then he said, it's a bilingual English-French school. And we were like, we don't speak French. My wife has a little bit of academic French, but nothing really. You're not gonna go to Paris and start talking to the locals, right? So we enrolled him, and the teacher, who was Algerian but studied in France and studied in the U.S., she said, out of all the kids, Masai is really taking towards utilizing the language. So she was like, there's a really good school in New York City that's a bilingual English-French immersion school that's subsidized by the French government. So she's like, I highly recommend you have him apply. He's actually really good at it. So we did have him apply, and he got in. So he's been there since kindergarten. So at English, at home, our main language is English.
Yeah.
But at school, 90% of his week is in French. We come home, he's speaking Tagalog and Spanish with my Filipino wife, right? And I was telling you earlier, so interesting is now he's obsessed with Japanese culture.
Yes.
And so he's picked up the iPad, and he kept asking us for 6 months, I want to learn Japanese, I want to learn Japanese, I want to learn Japanese. And so now he's studying Japanese on Duolingo. But our main language at home is English, but after he steps out the door, I think it's probably the last language that he speaks during the week.
That's amazing. I'm already thinking about all those languages that kids are, and I think this is the best. Obviously, it's the best age to learn new languages. They're just absorbing things like a sponge.
100%. And I think, when we keep talking about that element of culture, right, is one of the things that we say in the house is we always talk about superpowers, right? And my wife likes to joke, and we talk about, she goes, oh, Tinoy, your superpower is that you're one of the kindest people I know, right? And I don't see it because I activate who I am.
Yeah.
But we talk about language being a superpower, right?
Yes.
So you get to communicate with people that you wouldn't have other chances to. So whether you're fluent or not, it gives you the ability to relate to people. It also gives you the ability to understand, right? Education isn't necessarily tied to language, and I think, growing up in New York, especially being from New York, I used to see people who their main language was, Spanish or Indian, and they would struggle, and you realize how intelligent they are, but they just don't have the language, right? So being able to be empathetic to, people who can't figure out those things is super important. So, the language we always talk about being a superpower, which is kind of fun.
It is. Have you exposed your kid to those? I know YouTube is a very touchy topic when it comes to exposing your kids at an early age. But have you seen those YouTubers who are like polyglots and they speak all these 27, 30 languages, or they don't know a language, they study it for 2 weeks and then go to an area of maybe like Queens that they speak it maybe inside of a store?
Oh, Shauma.
Shauma, yeah. Shout out to Shauma.
Shout out to Shauma. No, we love Shauma. It's we try to do it through the lens of YouTube, like you said, is a touchy subject, and we've accidentally gone down the rabbit hole. Myself, right? I'm showing him something, and then all of a sudden you end up 3 videos down. You're like, wait, this is not where I intended.
Yeah.
But every once in a while we do go to like Shauma and we look at it because we want to make sure that he understands how really unique that is. And his father only speaks one language. I'm working on my Spanish, working on my French. It's not great. But my goal is, if he's going to be in this school until 12th grade, he's in 1st grade now, even if I take baby steps, Dr. Seuss in French, right?
Yeah.
This book in Spanish, by the time he graduates, I'll be functioning. So taking the long form view of really taking a step back and understanding that as an adult, you don't need to be perfect. It's okay to learn your original grammar. Right?
It is funny when you said, not funny, interesting when you made a really good point to say that the manner in which you communicate and the language when you don't have that ability, it eclipses the perception of your own intelligence. And there's tons of people who, especially in New York, there's tons of people who lack the skills to communicate, but are extremely intelligent and potentially very educated. They just don't have the ability to communicate in the language that we use, so it eclipses them and potentially their livelihood and their ability to make money as well.
Absolutely.
So it's such a powerful thing, communication, which I think is very understated, and I don't think people really understand the impact of how strong communication is, and especially the ability to communicate in different languages.
100%. And, you know, one of the things we also do is we, at school, they do a thing called dictation, where they kind of read to you. And usually, I mean, I didn't do dictation until I got to college. He's doing it in first grade. It's crazy. But they read out, you know, words or phrases, and the kid has to spell it out. And, you know, it's less so about accuracy, but more so about active listening. Right. And are you able to hear what's being said and then format it to paper? So we actually stole the lesson from the school, and we'll do dictation now, but for, you know, tasks, which is kind of interesting. So we're like, all right, Masi, like today we have Muay Thai, and then after that we have drums, but we do need to eat lunch in between drums. So we'll have them like write down the list. And it's so interesting too, right? Because, you know, my wife will play around with them, and she'll do like half of it in English, half of it in Tagalog, half of it is French, and some of it in Spanish. And then he's like, wait, trying to jump in between. But I think, you know, the more you do that, the more your brain kind of becomes auto fire, and you're able to catch it faster. So it's not about, for us, it's not about accuracy. For us, it's about the repetition of being able to jump from one to another. Yeah.
That's like when I speak Spanglish, when I'm like half of my sentences in English, the other half is in Spanish, because there's just certain words that you can't really, you know, like you
Don't
can
encapsulate.
Yeah. It's just like it doesn't have that same oomph, you know, when you say it in English.
I love that. Are you fluent in Spanish as well?
I am. Yeah.
Oh, you
Yeah.
are? Okay.
Yeah. I was born in Puerto Rico.
I love
I
that.
came from Puerto Rico. Me and my family. It was at the time. It was just me and my brother. So I'm the oldest of four.
Sure.
It was just me and my brother. I came when I was 4 years old, and then I went to school in Greenpoint. And I remember not being able to communicate in English. And I remember crying like in the class. Like I think my mom was like leaving when I was in kindergarten or first grade. And I was like, I must have said something in English. But over time, you know, I learned the English language. But I think I lost a lot of Spanish because I wasn't using it as much as home. I speak to my mom primarily in Spanish, to my dad in English. My dad speaks both English and Spanish. So I think when I started working this was when I was working in the 3-letter place.
Yes. Okay.
Well, anyways, I won't say the name, but when we worked there, I had to work with GED and English as a second language students. That's where I picked up the majority of my Spanish. And I like it just sort of like emphasized it. I was like, yo, I need to know this. Like, this is my native language. I should know how to speak it. Even if it's not perfect, as long as I can communicate. And believe me, having to talk and translate was like the biggest thing. And it made me, it made me learn a lot of Spanish there.
Well, you know, like those skills are somewhat perishable, and I've experienced that as well. I think growing up, I spoke, you know, like Spanish to my family, or primarily I would get spoken to in Spanish, and I would respond in English, and excuse me. And so over time, that was like the norm. And I would communicate in Spanish, but then there were a couple of years where I sort of lost it, and I stopped speaking Spanish. And my ability to, I mean, I could understand, but like the rate I wish I could translate it in my head kind of slowed down a little bit. And it wasn't until I moved to like Elmhurst or Jackson Heights area in Queens, where the population was 99% Latin, and most of the retail stores, all the stores in the area were also, you know, only spoke Spanish. So I was forced, it became almost like this immersive experience where I was forced to relearn. But ultimately I realized that the knowledge was there, just accessing it became harder from not using it. But once I was immersed in it again, I was able to access it again, and it was easier for me to pick up. But I do realize now, because I sort of tapered off from speaking Spanish, is my Spanish isn't as good as it was when I was living in that area. So it becomes this like perishable skill where if you sort of, I mean, you don't lose it completely, but you sort of like, you lose it a little bit over time from not using it.
And have you had the ability to pass the language on to Hunter as well, or is that something that he's working on?
I feel, unfortunately, not. I feel, and this is something that is kind of like I have to own, I don't think he's really in touch with his either, you know, strongly with his Asian or his Latin background. I think he knows and he understands and he's like, you know, aware of it, but it's not that he doesn't really know the culture that well. Also, I feel like, unfortunately, because of the way I grew up, I'm not as connected to that culture as well. Because, I mean, I think I lived with my mom till I was 7, and then I went to live with my dad, and then, and also, like, the environments I lived in, some of them were more conducive to, you know, Latin, you know, kids, and others were just like, you know, homogenized white areas,
right,
where you just sort of like, you're just trying just to like, in a sense, dilute yourself to sort of fit into the area and not be the other. So, so I feel like I do have some regrets. I feel like I wish I would have done things differently with Hunter. I think for a while he was doing Duolingo as well, but he did it for a couple months, and it just like he was done with it. But I think he was also trying to learn Spanish, Chinese, and Arabic, and he wanted to learn Arabic because at the the gym where we where our we met through through Masitan in Astoria. There's a lot of the owner's Moroccan. There's a lot of like Arabic speaking people there. Some of the coaches are Arabic, so he wanted to learn that as well. But I think it was sort of fleeting. I think I think because of Hunter's ADHD, he'll get hyper focused on something, but once it's done, it's sort of like it's gone. Yeah, and he doesn't want to do it anymore. So, but yeah, as far as to go back to your question, I feel like he is unfortunately more homogenized, and sort of like because also he's white passing. It's sort of like he just probably identifies more with can pass for just being a white boy.
Maybe he doesn't feel like the need to learn the language because of that. Because of he's white passing. I don't know if you've ever had that conversation with him or if he's ever brought it up to you.
Yeah. I think he's mentioned. A lot of my friends know Spanish, and I'm Puerto Rican. I'm like, yeah, but I try to teach you, and also in school, we'll try to see there's Spanish classes, but he doesn't like it. So it's like like how else? I mean, like I speak to it, we could try to do it at home, but if also I feel like I can't force it down his throat as well.
Yeah. I think it's this whole conversation brings up a really big, large format conversation, and like if I can kind of steer the conversation for a bit. But you said something that was really interesting in terms of like not being immersed in it, right, and being away from it. And I think part of that, I'll start with myself. I identify as a millennial, right? That's my age bracket, and I think a lot of us whose parents immigrated to the States, it was all for them. It was all about assimilation. It was about how can you sound American? How can you only speak English? And a lot of languages were lost. And I think one of the things that I identify growing up in the Bronx is my friends, although it was a large immigrant community and a mixed immigrant community, it was truly split. Like some people truly had like deep cultural roots at home, and some people were fully embracing transitioning into like an American lifestyle. Yeah. But what I noticed after I went to college and came back home, and just had a lot more visibility into like how the world is shaping out, is all of my friends who had lost that connection to their culture, all of them regretted it. Right. And so whether it was language or whether it was food, what's the phrase that everybody's using now? We're losing recipes. Right.
Oh, yeah.
but it was true. Right. Like I have, Filipino friends that, they identify with the culture, but they don't cook the food. They don't know how to. Right. They don't speak the language. They know a couple of words, and I was able to identify that before Masi was born. So I kind of lucked out. And so we've placed a big emphasis on trying to drive that and finding ways to initiate that. And so back to your point, I know you had mentioned, Pete, to, how do you expose them to it? Like, have you ever considered, like, I know Hunter is pretty athletic, like via sports, right? So I know that like the soccer leagues, I'm not a big soccer fan, but like the football leagues in Europe, there's the big Spanish leagues and things like that. Have you ever tried to do it outside of an academic lens? Like do something that he enjoys?
I haven't. That's actually a very good idea. Not really. I think a lot of his physical activities are more like have been based around maybe potentially some of my interests growing up. Sure. And what he sort of like we've fallen into. I think he's tried soccer for a little bit. He wasn't that in love with it. But that's actually a really good point. It's like there's other ways to expose him to it. And there was something else actually that I wanted to point out that has like stood on my mind because like when you said it, it really resonated with me. Was the because Masai is biracial, that you tried to make sure that he felt he was full everything. And the acceptance. And that's one of the things that I feel like growing up, I always struggled with. It was like a really hard, even to this day, I still struggle with it because the manner in which I grew up maybe wasn't the healthiest, but I feel like there's this weird disconnect with my background and my ethnic background and my own personal identity because I never really felt accepted in either culture. I feel like because I was half Chinese, I had like, some of my uncle. I mean, I had an uncle who, I mean, he's okay, guy now, and I see him now. But as kids, kids can be shitheads. And they were kind of like, he would kind of like mock me for being Chinese, and say like like shitty things, like ching and shit like that.
Yeah.
Just like but it's like it wasn't like pure malice. It was just like kids being assholes. Yeah. And he's only a couple years older than me, so it's like it's not like he's an adult saying this to a child. And on the flip side, I had like a very similar experience with my dad's wife growing up, where we had a very tumultuous relationship, but she would kind of like, in essence, call, there's this word Chinese, so she would in essence call me spick, and so, and culturally, because people, I say, oh, I'm Chinese, people are shocked, like, oh, you're Chinese, because I present as maybe Latino, maybe Filipino, maybe Mexican, Peruvian, whatever, but no one really knows. So it was, when you said it, it resonated, because I thought, oh my God, it's something that I've always struggled with, because I never really felt accepted in either culture. So I just sort of maybe deferred, or just kind of like just navigated my own way in whatever spaces I had, and didn't really focus on that. But I did have this very visceral emotional experience when I because I've been to Puerto Rico a handful of times in my life, but most times it was very like short. It was like for a weekend, or for like a couple of days. It wasn't really immersed, and it was when I was younger, where your priorities aren't really the experience. Is more like, I want to party, I want to drink, I want to meet girls or whatever. And last 2 years ago, I went to Puerto Rico, and I was with Hunter, and we were driving from the airport to the Airbnb, and he had fallen asleep, and I'm driving, and I'm looking around in the island, and you're thinking about it, I'm like, I can feel it again. I got like emotional. I was like, holy shit, like I felt like I was home. And it was the first time I'd felt that, really. I was like, because I always felt very disconnected, and in general, like not just disconnected with culture, but just disconnected in general from people, from the way I grew up. But I had this visceral response, like, oh my God, I felt like, wow, this is like, I feel like I'm home. And it was the first time that it hit me that strongly, and like I felt that I felt at home anywhere, really. And that's when I think I started to really think about the impact it had, and maybe regret, like, I guess, homogenizing, or not really pushing for Hunter to be connected to this. But yeah, I think it's also like, that's a good idea to try it in other ways besides academics, because he hates school. He's not a fan of school.
Yeah, same.
But in other ways, is like, that could be strong. But I think for you guys, I know like Zach is proud of like Dominican and Puerto Rican, and you guys have really strong family roots. And also, I think what impacts more is, I don't know about your family situation, is that I'm sort of on my own, sort of. Like my mom lives in Jersey, but I see her 2-3 times a year. My dad lives, he has a house in Whitestone in Queens, but I think right now he was in China. He left right before the lockdown, so this is maybe November of 2019, I believe. And then now he was, then of course he was in China. They locked down, so he was there a couple of years. He just went to Taiwan, and I have no idea when he'll come back. And we speak, so I haven't really seen my dad in 5 years.
Oh wow!
So, and he hasn't seen my son. So it's a very, it's not like we always had the closest relationship anyway. But I'm like, it's like I'm very disconnected from both cultures, just because the way I sort of grew up.
Right. So it kind of leads you to you have to actively seek it to be able to experience it. Yeah, that's really challenging.
That's interesting, because for me, it's kind of the opposite, where it's like, even if I try to stay away from family, they'll find me.
Yeah.
They'll find, and they'll come and get me, and they're like, yeah, we need your son right now. We're going to take him. We're going to, so we do have a lot of family here, and I do have a lot of family in Puerto Rico. I still feel connected to them, and I'm happy for that. I'm proud that, I'm even proud to say that I say I'm 100% Puerto Rican, and that's not against anyone that's Puerto Rican and raised here, but that's always like a little, I was born on the island, I'm better than not for nothing though. But I think I have some of that pride, but I'm absolutely proudful to be a Puerto Rican and still be in touch with people. But it is, I can totally see that, where it's like, if you're not in touch with them, or you're just not like around people like that, you sort of like lose that connection. I still feel rooted, and I think you brought up something important to know before. It was like in food. I feel like as a Puerto Rican, I should know how to cook, how to make Puerto Rican food, and I feel prideful that my mom loves to cook. My dad doesn't really cook; he knows a couple of things, but my mom is she stays at home. So my father's the primary breadwinner to this day. And she's taught me some of her recipes, but I always have this conflict where it's, Me, it's Puerto Rican food and Japanese food. And that's the thing, because I'm trying to master Japanese food because I absolutely love Asian food, but primarily Japanese food. But I also love my Puerto Rican food. And it's probably, a lot of that food isn't as healthy, depending on how you cook it, traditional ways, probably not the healthiest some things. Like I don't eat pork anymore. But if my mom makes pernil, I'm gonna have it because I love.
There's nobody turning down pernil.
I was able to resist. I think 1 year, and then next year I was like, nah, I'll go to the hospital for this. But now I feel like I wanna hone on Puerto Rican recipes. I want to hone on Japanese recipe, and I want to do it both. And I want to pass some of that to Zachary. Zachary has some interest, but he's kind of like, I'll help you flip a pancake.
Yeah.
He's not really into like, let's mix mirin with sake with this and that, all of that. So I'm trying to get him. I'm trying to get him sort of into that.
But I'm sorry. But I think food is kind of like a gateway into culture. I think
Yes.
It's actually like really the only strong connection I have with either culture is like, my Chinese background. I'm very familiar with Chinese cuisine and how vast it is and how it's just not this one thing that people always assume it is. And the same thing with like Puerto Rican food. So I think it's a good way, like a gateway, but at some point I feel like for me at least, it's really the only strong connection I have, which is like sometimes it doesn't feel like enough.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would kind of push back on that. The only reason being is because I work in a space that's very emotion driven, right? I sell luxury retail, right? Nothing I sell has, is a need. Everything is a want, right? And so part of what we do at work is we sell to the emotion, right? And when we talk about emotion, for example, like I sell crystal, right? We talk about like a lighting, if you're buying a lighting fixture, and some clients will come in and, I'll use this as an analogy. They'll go, how much is it? What's the size? What's the dimension? And yes, I have all those answers and I can give it to you. But before we do that, how do you want to feel in your space? How do you want the people that enter your space? How do you want them to feel? What do you want the memories of when you sit down at the table and you're doing homework with your children? What do you want their memory as they look up to feel like, right? And so I think for me, the way I look at it is food is so emotional driven, right? You can remember to your point, like during the holiday, I don't eat pork, but pernil, that my mom, like that's Christmas for me, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. And I think food is probably for our family one of the strongest gateways, because that is where that's where people commune around, right? People come together to experience that culture around food. So I wouldn't discredit that, because I think, that's a really interesting way, especially when you have the two strong cultures like that. That's a really strong way to impact, because even if you go to a restaurant, the decor is going to be reflective of the culture. The drinks that correspond with the food is going to be reflective of the culture. The men, right? How people serve is all going to be respectful of the culture. Like I love when I first met Ida, and I went to dinner at her house for the very first time, and I had Filipino food before, but it was at restaurants in New York City, which is the Melting Pot. But to go to somebody's home and then they set the table and it's a spoon and a fork, not a knife, and I'm sitting here looking at the table like, I don't want to be rude, but I don't know what's happening right now. How am I supposed to use this? And I kind of had to learn that, right? So I think of like Chinese culture and like, chopsticks, and, you have your sake, and being able to commune around the table and have that experience. There's a new restaurant in Astoria that's a Japanese restaurant. Both of you guys might actually appreciate this. But the way that they serve the food is in like the traditional Japanese way. So like you kneel on the floor and do all of that. So we're actually trying to figure out a time to go next week to go to the restaurant. But like we're doing that because Masai is so interested in Japanese culture that we know he's going to lose it when he goes in and they have all the pillows on the floor. And so, I would say because your cultures are so strong, maybe don't discredit the food as much as you think. And it could be an easy way to connect and have a dinner and, kind of talk about it on the drive home.
Yeah. True.
Yeah. It's kind of fun.
I would say, I think the last time I cooked, and I was really proud, even just explaining some, how I used to have it as kids. This is a arroz con salchicha. So arroz con salchicha is just yellow rice with Vienna sausage just cut up.
Yeah.
And I made it this week for the first time in, maybe 5 or 6 years. And it was funny because we was like, we were hungry. I was like, I could do Uber Eats. I kind of wasn't in the mood to cook, but I was like, I really need to save money. So then I looked and I had every single thing I needed. The only thing I didn't have was a protein, but I was like, whatever, the meat is the salchicha, is the Vienna sausages. So I made it from scratch. I had homemade sofrito that my mom made. I've had it in the fridge for months. And when it was complete, I was like, to me, it was perfect. And I was like, I think if I would have planned it, it wouldn't have come out any better. But I talked to Zachary and I was like, Zach, you got to cut up the salchichas, like, make them, 3 millimeters. Or, I just showed them the size. And I told him, I was like, listen, Zach, you got to understand that this is my absolute favorite meal of all time, right? If I was given a choice to have a meal before I die, it would be this with chicken cutlet. And I was like, I grew up eating this at least once a week. And I told him, like, this meal is super important. I was like, I'll show you one day how to do this. But in the meantime, you could help me cut these Vienna sausages and wet the rice and, soak it and all that stuff. I think it was like super important. And he felt good and we ate it together. And I felt like that bonding with my kid. So I look to do that the same with like Japanese food, even though, I don't have, obviously I'm not Japanese, but us having Japanese friends and with the hopes of going to Japan later this year, I hope to establish that bond, that connection.
It's those memories. Yeah. It's those memories. And that's what's going to take, Zach, Hunter, Mas, as they become adults, right? That same thing gets passed down. It might edit, right? How they grow up is different than how we grew up. It might shift because they might have a partner that has another culture that gets infused in it. Yeah. But at the end of the day, those moments are what being a parent is about. It's about delivering those memories and those small little micro moments that really feel impactful, and kind of forming who our kids are. So I love that you shared that. That's a really powerful story too. Yeah.
It's funny, you have those moments like that. And you don't notice the impact of it immediately. There's never like, oh yeah, I taught him this, and the next day he was like, that was really cool. Sometimes you'll get it a year or 2 years. Or he's like, hey Dad, remember when you made arroz con salchicha and it was just me and you and I was helping you cut and this and that? And I'm like, bloop, little teardrop.
Well, it does. I feel like those memories are really powerful. I think, and I think going back, I think you made a really good point, like food and that kind of thing. Does have this profound impact on people, because I think one of my earliest memories, I think one of the memories that like kind of sustained me as like into adulthood and it was like of my mom. And I think my mom struggled with mental illness for a lot of her life, but before her mental illness sort of captured her, I remember as a kid one of the things we would do together is cook. And like when she would she'd make Puerto Rican food. And one of my responsibilities was to use like the mortar and pestle, or let's call it the pilon, and crush the garlic. It's like Puerto Rican food is very garlic heavy. Yeah. So I'll be crushing the garlic and we cook together. But now thinking back, I'm like, I remember those moments, and I think those were the moments that kind of like, as an adult, like I love to cook now and I love to feed people, and I realized that what you said before is. It does have a profound effect, and those memories sustain you. And those memories were able to sustain me enough to like help me get through the more tumultuous times when my mom's mental illness kind of like, sort of captured her. So it's like, so yeah, I think those memories do really kind of like are profound and have a really deep impact. And you're 100% right. You can't really dismiss them because even though there's times, I wish I had more, it was enough to sustain me for the time.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And one of the things I know I'm guilty of, and I'm trying to be better at, and I'm going to pose a question to both of you, but is creating, traditions, right? So there's some traditions that our family has from both sides of us, in the Philippines during New Year's, you have to like only eat round fruits. You don't spend money the day of New Year's because you want money coming in, not going out, things like that, right? So it's kind of fun. You're supposed to jump 3 times at midnight to grow taller, but my wife's entire family is short. So we kind of cut that out of the, I was like, it's whatever it wasn't working. But, my question to you guys is, what are some traditions that you have in your houses that you feel are super important, whether big or small, that kind of help shape who your nuclear family is?
It's a good question. I think one of the things for me personally is I wouldn't consider myself a really religious person. I was maybe more so years ago, maybe prior to COVID, but we always pray for Zachary, to the point where if Zachary's go to bed. Sometimes I'm just like, all right, just listen, it's already past your bedtime, go to bed. And, I'm trying to watch my show. That's where I'm trying to get. But he's like, can you pray for me? Can you pray? He always asks, can you pray for me? So we'll do a quick prayer, 5 or 10 minutes. We're praying for the people around us, for our friends and family. I always ask him, what are you praying for? Like, what do you want, God to help you with? And he'll say, and we'll do it every day. One of the other things that we also do is, as far as like daily stuff, maybe that's one of the things that sticks out to me. But even like holidays, would you count, I guess, holidays?
Yeah, of course.
So one of the ones that we try to celebrate every year, and I think we skipped it this year only because Evelyn was sick and we weren't in the same place, was Three Kings Day. So Three Kings Day was usually what you do is you put like I think carrots, and you put grass like in a little like tin can or on a little plate, and it's meant for like the three kings who came on I don't know if they were horses or donkeys. I can't remember the entire tradition. I'm failing at this right now. But we do it, and it's essentially you give gifts to your children on the day, and I think it's supposed to be over several days, but you give it to them. I think it's like January 6th. And it's like right after Christmas. So I'm like, I already bought all these gifts. I'm like, I'm broke enough as it is. So you always get some like leftover stuff and you give it to your kids. That's something we try to do every year. That's other daily stuff. That's hard to say. I have to really like, I'll pass it on to Pete for this one.
The unfortunate part is there's not really many traditions, I think, which it's unfortunate. And I wish maybe it's time to like change that, but there's not really that many traditions we do, just because, and maybe it's the way my brain functions, is that I'm like, and I'm trying to make this change and be more present in the moment, but I feel like my brain works in like this very task oriented manner, and when I have certain things I got to do, and I'm like, oh, this has to get done 1, 2, 3, 4, and if I can't get it done, it like gives me anxiety. I'm like, I got to get this shit done. So a lot of things things I always thought I wanted to do when I had a kid were, for example, like I feel very strongly about eating dinner together every night. Yes. And I think it's one of those things together at a table, but it's one of the things that I wanted to do. But now, because like majority of my life is like a single parent, I'm like we're rushing from after school to homework to some extracurricular activity, so I'm coming home and I'm just cooking dinner. And then by that time, it's like 7:30, 8 o'clock. Is homework done? All right. And now I'm like, I have to clean up. I have to do this. I have to do that. And because I have this list that in my mind, I'm like, this shit has to get done. A lot of times, we'll sit with each other at the table, but he's on his iPad. I'm like just shoveling the food into my mouth. And I'm done in like 5-10 minutes. He's still eating his food. I start cleaning the dishes in the kitchen. I got to clean the pots, the pans, whatever. And then by the time he's done, I'm done cleaning. He's just finishing his dinner. So I get his utensils and his plates, and I'm cleaning up his mess, cleaning the table. I'm like, all right, now you got to take a bath. And because it's I feel like we're sort of like in this survival mode. I'm just trying to get all this shit done. All the stuff that I want to do and all the things I feel like are important sort of go by the wayside. And I think that's really an unfortunate part. I feel like there's certain things I want to do. It's just, and maybe it's on me also to like make it happen. But I feel like sometimes the way my brain works and the way, and I'm really realizing this now as I get older, the manner in which I lived to get me out of the situation I was in when I was younger is not really the way to live. Like, people can't operate like that. It's not sustainable. Yeah. And you miss so much along the way if you're like always on this go. What's next? What's the next step? Yep. What's the next thing, a task on my list I have to get accomplished? I'm not really there, and I feel like that sense of like, all right, I'm done. It's relief. Yeah. But I've already missed so much. So it's an unfortunate part that I don't have that many traditions, and there's things I'd like to do. It's a bit of survival mode. Yeah.
It's like get through the task, because it's one misstep in the task kind of throws everything else off.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think it's interesting that you had mentioned the dynamics are different, especially being a single dad. That's a whole different level of complexity and nuance that, I just don't have visibility to, at least from a personal landscape. I was raised by a single mom, so I can see that, but being raised by a dad and a single dad is a whole different dynamic.
Yeah.
So I can imagine how like we're process oriented, right? I feel like most dads are like, all right, this is the total bucket. You know, you take this, I'll do this, and we finish it all by this time. And then if we have free time, we can maneuver afterwards. But one of the things that we do, luckily, have the time and the space and the brain power to do is force, I would say, at least 5 to 6 days of the week, we do try to have a meal together, typically dinner. And something that we introduced, I think this started around the pandemic. Masi was 2. Again, I work in retail, so typically I go into the office 5 days a week, or my boutique 5 days a week. But COVID gave me the ability to not go in for the first time in my career. I've been working since I was 16, right? So it was interesting, a dynamic for me to be home and to be more present. And during that time, he was 2, so it was very formative years. And we would sit and have dinner together. And one of the things that I genuinely love doing is as we're eating, one of the person, doesn't have to be anyone specific, will start the conversation and say, what are you grateful for today? And it's so interesting. You know, Brian had mentioned it earlier. Sometimes you don't see it right away. Sometimes it comes years later. And, you know, sometimes Moss will go, you know, I'm really grateful for my family, you know, or I'm really grateful that mommy got her promotion. And you're like, wait, so you have been paying attention to like all of the stress and all of the high points and all of the low points and all the conversations that have been happening over the last, you know, few days, weeks, months, because it'll circle back. And, you know, it's what one of the things that I take from that is, you know, we're all human, and, you know, sometimes my wife and I get into it, but we're having dinner and I have to say something that I'm grateful for or thankful for that day. And I'm like, oh, what I really want to say, I'm not going to say, but it does put you in a space where you kind of need to reflect. Right? And I think, you know, as men, and I can speak for myself, there are times where I allow like anger or frustration or just exhaustion, right, to kind of take hold. But that small window, it's you know, maybe in totality, a 5-minute conversation amongst the 3 of us. That really small window forces me to a place where I have to say, you know what, all the things that are going left or right, I'm grateful that, you know, I can come home and have this meal, even if it's like the most mundane thing. I'm grateful we can eat together. Like that's enough. And I feel like, you know, we always talk about right now, that big conversation is around like dopamine, especially with like social media, and everybody just, it's like finding those little moments of like dopamine that like gets you happy. And like that small little spark does kind of, it's a mood shifter. Right.
It's like a reset.
It's a reset. Yeah. And you kind of pause and you force yourself into a brain space where you can say, no, I am genuinely grateful that I can pick up the phone and call my mom. Right. It can be
something
the most
as simple as that.
It's something as simple as that, right? Because you don't always have those moments to reflect, and you know, that small time is super, super helpful for us.
Yeah.
I think that's a very powerful daily tradition you guys have. I think like it seems like something that's so easy to do and easily implemented, but like the more I think about it and the more you describe it, it's like, what a powerful, that's amazing.
It's a lot. Yeah. And there's been moments, right? Like half the time it's playful, but there's moments where like Mas will say something and Ido and I will like look up from the table and look at each other like, that was so profound. Right? It's like, it's a 6-year-old telling me like he's grateful that his teacher finally did. And you're like, wow, you're really in tune to the world. But you know, that's one of the things that I think is my biggest takeaway so far from being a dad is like, I learned so much more about myself. What's important to me, what is I thought was important that is absolutely irrelevant to me nowadays. And I get that all from, you know, having conversations with this small human being. It's so interesting.
You learn a lot from these small human beings.
I'm telling you.
They're smarter than you think. And I think a lot of it is like, sometimes it's like selective hearing, because you don't, you know, sometimes I'll talk or I'll say something and I was like, but you weren't even in the room. Like, where did you pick that up? But I noticed he'll repeat a lot of things and I'm like, oh my God, I just got to be careful what I say, because I'm like, yo, you too smart for your own good. Yeah. And it's funny because even younger, we used to say, sometimes we used to speak in Spanish, and because you know his Spanish wasn't there, but his understanding is a lot better than his speech, and we'll say something, I'm like, yeah, you know, Spanish to Evelyn, maybe like in the car, and then he'll pick up his head and he'll respond in English. And I'm like, damn it, I thought you didn't know anything. Like, what happened? You know,
I thought I snuck that one by you.
You're like, he knows a secret language.
Exactly. I learned a 4th language or something. Oh, man.
Wow. Actually, something I wanted to ask.
Sure.
Tinoy is so. You said your mom was a special education teacher.
Yeah, she taught special education for junior high school for 33 years. Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
And how do you think? I mean, because I think I look at my personal trajectory and like my son and his potential future. What do you think the impact is that education and potentially also your mom was an educator, and I'm sure she instilled the importance of education to you. How do you think that's impacted your life, and how will you implement that with Masi?
That's a really great question. So I think there's two aspects of that. There's the academic side of it, which is a huge component of it. But I think also what's interesting, and we touched on it earlier, there's also that single parent component of it, right? And so because my mom worked in the Board of Ed, the more degrees, the more money you make. Granted, we needed the money, right? So a lot of my early childhood, my mom was single mom, but also in school, right? And she was, working one job, working after school, but then going to classes after nights, right? And so it was that whole mixed dynamic. But I think for me, one of the main things that I got from that experience is education is hyper important, but education is not strictly academic. I think that is my biggest takeaway from my mom. And, I think, we talked about like who your partner is will also shape kind of who you are. And my wife growing up in the suburbs, she comes from a family of like doctors, right? So a level of education that obviously has to be like much higher. But it's interesting, right, that when I compare the two of them, like there's a level of like street smarts that I had growing up in the Bronx.
Yep.
But then there's also like what my mom thought was like out of the box for us was like, oh, we're having sushi, right? But then when I got to college, I was like, California roll is not really the right. We talk about Japan, right? California roll is like the entry level sushi point, but that was her like unique, right? So like my exposure to the California roll was like, oh, I'm eating sushi, doing that. But then as I got older, I was able to understand and learn, right, academically, learn outside of academics that there's more, right? There's more. So I became a student of learning, and that's kind of a gift and a curse. And my superpower, one of my superpowers, is that I know a lot. I know a little about a lot. So I can jump into a conversation about anything. And, for me as a parent, we're trying to drive home those two staples, right? Like, yes, academically, you need to be the best of the best, right? I grew up in a Black family. So yes, we understand that there's things that are evolving in modern culture, but at the end of the day, you are a Black child.
Yeah.
This year, there's clearly going to be a rollback on DEI programs and all of those. So, your opportunity to enter spaces is going to be more challenging because they have, institutions have the ability to not reach back out. So for us, that academic component is extremely important. But also, the social and the cultural component. Like, are you able to sit at a table and have a meal and have an elevated conversation? Zach, we were talking about giving a dap earlier, and he came back. One of my biggest thing is making sure that when you give somebody a handshake, are you making eye contact? Are you present, right, in the moment? And a lot of that I got from my mom by putting me in spaces to learn in school and going to Catholic school and being very regimented. But then also being able to expose to education outside the classroom, I think is hyper important. And a lot of times it falls by the wayside because we're so focused on like, are you getting the grades, that we're like, are you able to navigate space?
Yes.
Right.
I think that social component is the hard part. You said navigating spaces is a struggle, even for like adults. For me, it's like hard to navigate spaces sometimes.
Oh, I struggle with that mightily. So I was telling Pete on the way here. So my son's school is one of the elite academic institutions in New York. Right. Cool. So, granted, we do have the benefit that most people are international. So there's a level of, regardless of socioeconomic standing, people are looking for community.
Yes.
Right. So we have the kid who's super cute, really sweet, right? Everybody seems, he has a really like jovial personality. So people tend to gravitate towards him. He hasn't learned how to hone it yet. So I need to figure that out. Like, people will come to him and he's like, he's super social, but he's also super fine, like playing completely by himself.
Yeah.
And so he'll have like kids come up to him and be like, hey, can we play with you? And he's like, and we'll slowly like turn around and walk away. So we're working on that. But back to the school component, right? Like people are very, very ranged in terms of like socioeconomic class. So in his school, he has kids that have, you know, their family worth is probably over 100, 200, $500 million. Yeah. And you have kids that are on the lower end of the spectrum. And then you have like your middle class family like us, right? And so part of what we try to do daily is also instill in him like how you navigate space, how do you be authentic, right? And he's at that age where first grade, every time he comes home, there's something new that he picked up, and we're like, whoa,
yeah,
like let's peel back the layers. We're not telling you no, but like when we navigate, when we talk about like navigating spaces, like, is this who you are, or is this something that you heard and you're emulating?
Yes,
right. If this is who you are, okay, let's navigate that. How it comes about, but like I don't want you to emulate and be somebody else. I want you to be Masai, because that's hyper important. Like reflect, and if this is who you are, that's fine. But really think about being yourself and navigating the space, because as he traverses through this school experience, there's going to be kids who go, "Hey, we're going to go to the Swiss Alps for snowboarding. Can you come?" And the kids will fly first class. We're not flying first class. We're absolutely not.
We're driving. No,
right? We're going to drive to Switzerland. So. But it's like if you instill that really strong background of like who you are, you're never going to feel, back to that like race component, like you'll never feel less than, because you know that you might not have a $30 million apartment on Fifth Avenue, but if you're happy and you're smart and you have friends and you have community, you have that basis to walk into space and say, this is who I am. Like, take it or leave it, but this is who I am.
Yeah, stand up proud. Yep.
You stand proud on your 2 feet. So it's a challenge, especially as a Black father. I think, I have to, trinkle in a little conversations about race, but don't make it super focal. Like I want him to know who he is as a person, but also know where some of the pitfalls are going to be. And I don't shy away from having those conversations, even regardless of age, because I think at some point the conversation is going to come up, whether I give him the background of it or not. So I'd rather prepare in advance and share that information so he can kind of navigate that on his own. I don't know. Do you guys have similar experiences with trying to like navigate spaces?
I think personally I do, and I have, and I still struggle with it. I think my personality is maybe a little bit of an introvert, but I try to be more extroverted, but it takes a lot of prompting internally to talk. I mean, like you and I met at Citan, and I'm friendly with everyone, but it's not like I gravitate or will have a full-blown conversation with a lot of people, just because I'm really bad at small talk. And sometimes I can, other times I just can't do it. And sometimes because of like I don't enjoy it, it's like that annoyance or whatever, like my dislike for it is present on my face. So it kind of gives me more of like an unapproachable maybe vibe that I put out. But there are times when I talk to other dads, other parents, who I feel like we can have like a decent conversation, like a meaningful conversation. And that's where I feel like I'll connect with people. If it's about like sports or about the team or about the weather, I'm like, yeah, we can talk about that for a few minutes. But after a while, I'm like, fuck this.
No, it's funny because I feel like I personally land slightly on the opposite side. So really quickly, I found this this kind of like thought piece that was talking about introvert, extrovert. And I thought it was really interesting because the hypothesis was that many times people consider extroverts people who are so outgoing and big personalities and need to be out, and introvert as the opposite, people who are internal, don't want to talk, a little bit more, we know the kind of tropes. But what they were kind of hypothesizing was that introvert and extrovert isn't who you show externally, but how you recharge. And when I thought about it that way, it really changed my thought process because I always consider myself an extrovert. Yeah. But then I realized like when I'm in a bad mood or like things feel super overwhelming or, things that just feel like they're out of control, my recharge is actually, I just need to be alone. I need time by myself. And it can be a short amount of time. Sometimes it's an hour. Sometimes it's like a day and I just need a nap, right? And it's like because of the nature of my work, I tend to have to host every day,
Yes.
right? Hosting people, hosting experiences. Then being in, my son's school, I'm hosting him and parents and things like that. But my recharge, sometimes I just need that like 1 to 4 hours alone, and then I can come back and be the best version of myself. And it made me realize like I don't mind speaking in a large group. I don't mind being by myself, but like when I need that like refresh, I just need space away. Whereas like extroverts are people who, and it doesn't even have to be a big group, but maybe it's like their recharge is I need to go and see my mom and my family. Like I need that group. I need to see people, and that's their reset. So I wanted to like toss that to you and see if that like that still landed with you, because when I read it, I was like, oh my God.
Yes, when you're saying, I'm like, yeah, because I think
Now that you think about it,
I mean, I'm more withdrawn, or not withdrawn, maybe like a little more quieter, a little more, like not as vocal. I mean, I don't think I've ever been kind of crazy loud or rambunctious in any spaces. But I think when I need to recharge, I prefer to be around people, and there, I guess, but also, I mean, I spent a lot of time alone as a kid, and like as an adult. I don't like feeling alone. I feel like I like the feeling of community.
Yeah.
I like to have like people around me. We don't necessarily have to be talking.
Yes.
It's not like I need the verbal interaction or like like a conversation. I just need to feel like I'm with someone else.
Yeah.
Right? And that's more of a reassuring feeling for me, is like I don't have to talk, just be with me in the space. So that's really interesting. I was like, if you can send me the article, I'm going to read that.
Yeah, I'll pull it up. It was super interesting. And you had said that. I think my question for you is, especially as like a single dad, do you find that it's tough to find that time to kind of recharge?
I think it is. I think because most of my time is spent, I mean, actually, yes and no. I spent a lot of time with Hunter. I feel the dynamic is different. I think, especially now, he's getting to an age where, I was joking with before where he said something to me like, I feel like, he was upset that I was trying to like put him in some other activity. And he's like, I feel like you're trying to control my life. And I'm like, yeah, motherfucker, I am. I'm like, yeah.
that's my job.
Yeah. I'm like,
I'm paying for you, buddy.
I'm like,
you're an expense item.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah, you're right. 100% I'm controlling your life.
Big facts, no cap.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's the dynamic we have. There are times where I feel like at the end of the night is when everything is sort of done and sort of I'm on my own. I feel like that's when I need the most, and that's when I feel the most isolated. I think there are times. I mean, I'm in a relationship with a woman, and she's a single mom as well. And there are times where we would watch TV, but like over the phone, and I would have like one ear pod in, and listen to it, and we're watching the show together. I mean, so we're sort of watching together, but not together. But that was enough to sort of like recharge me. And I found like on the nights that we didn't really have that or have that time, I had a hard time falling asleep. I had a hard time, like I guess maybe the task of the day or the whatever was on my mind for the day, I wasn't able to decompress from it or sort of release it. And then there are times, I mean, I'll try to go to sleep, but I'm thinking about, all right, tomorrow I have to do this, or I'll start even thinking about the day and the way the day,
Back
broke
to
down.
the task.
Exactly. And like, what could I have done to make this easier? Or if I could just do this, it'll shave 3 minutes of time, trying to make it more efficient for the next day, which is fucking crazy. It's like, it's like, that's a fucking crazy way to think.
Calculating.
Yeah. But yeah, and it's crazy when you're saying that, because I think that amount, even though we're not even in the same space and we're not necessarily talking to each other because both phones are muted because the TVs, the audio from the TV is disruptive. But just we're sort of together, and that was enough to sort of help me relax enough to like let go of that task process oriented like state of mind I was in.
I think one of the words that you mentioned was super important, decompress. That's a word that I learned, and as an adult, as a dad, that I was like, this word describes the feeling that I'm having, but I was like, I didn't know about that word before. I was like, where was this word when I needed to tell people, listen, I need to decompress. I can't go out right now. I can't do this. But besides that word, my other word that I like to use, and I've used it on the podcast before, is my social battery. My social battery is very finite, right? It's like I am an introvert. I consider myself an introvert, but when I'm in a space that I'm comfortable with other people, like you guys, my extrovert qualities tend to come out. But after a while, I'm excited. I'm this and that, and my social battery it's not even like it'll be like 10%, 5%. It's like it shuts off completely, and I'm like, all right, now I'm not in the mood. I don't want to talk anymore. I just want to leave. That tends to happen when I'm at an event when there's a lot of people. Like I can't do like these parties or these clubs where there's like really loud music. I'm like, I never had that lifestyle where I was like go to the club and I'm like, yo, I'm there at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I leave and my ears are ringing. I've done that a few times and I was like, never again. I was like, it's just not my lifestyle. I can't do it. And I've done it a few times as an adult. Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, we tend to have a lot of parties, a lot of anniversaries, and I go and I'm like, yeah, I gotta go. I'm done. I was like, I can't be starting a party at 8 o'clock because I'm already in the corner like this, yawning, and I'm like, this isn't my lifestyle. I can't do it. But no, I definitely consider myself an introvert until I'm around a couple of people. The way I recharge myself is sort of, I think I need moments where I am by myself, but only for a limited amount. I think being by yourself for a long time is very dangerous, and it's not really good for your health, your mental health. But being at my parents' house is something comfortable. I'll go there and I'm like, Mami bendición, I'll say hi. And then I'll go on the couch. They're like, what are you going to do? You're going to pray? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to pray. And that means I'm just going to sleep. I'm going to take a nap on the couch.
Full on nap.
It's a full on nap on the couch. I'm just like this. And my mom knows she'll throw a little blanket over me. And I feel special and warm again, like a little kid. But that's it's like one of the ways I recharge, as an adult. And I think you have to do that. You got to take care of yourself, man. Because if not, who else is going to do it for you? You have to put yourself first so that you can take care of others, right? Take care of yourself, take care of others.
100%. It's funny that you said being alone by yourself isn't a good idea. So it's not a good time to tell you that I'm considering a darkness retreat, right?
What's this? What's a darkness retreat?
So Aaron Rodgers, one of the quarterbacks in the NFL, he did this retreat where you go into the woods, into like a reserve, and you go into full, complete darkness for a finite period of time. So whether it's 24 hours, 48 hours, 4 days, whatever, but it's complete darkness. Like you have two strings on either side. One is for bathroom, one is for something else like food and stuff, and they'll bring you food daily. But the idea of it is to really submerge yourself into yourself. And so I saw it and everybody was like kind of making fun of it. They was like, this is weirdo or whatever. But when I was just curious, right? Like I'm a naturally curious person. Right. So while everybody was like making jokes and making fun of it on like online and social media, I was like, I'm just curious, like what is this thing that he did? So I looked it up, and in one of the pages that I found, they were really talking about, and they do these like, people have these like testimonials afterwards, and they talk about what they discovered about themselves, the things that they thought about. And it's this really interesting, and I'll circle back in a second, but this is really interesting moment of like introspection where you don't have those, to your point, like decompressing. You don't have any sort of those pressures coming down to you. So at that point, it's just you and your thoughts. So times when, and Pete, you had brought this up, where you just feel like you're tasking and you don't have the time you're trying to shave off 3 minutes. There's nothing but time. Yeah. There's nothing but time. So you're forced to really think about those moments that are difficult. You're forced to think about what makes you happy. You're forced to think about, oh, I wish I would have handled this situation different. Or you're forced to say, I'm really proud of myself for this, because there's nothing but time and yourself. And so, it still freaks me out, and I'm low key absolutely terrified of it. But I think my curious nature has kicked in. And I know that it would be a challenge for me to do a long period of time, but maybe even like a 24-hour. And I'll tell you, this is what I wanted to circle back for. I did go to Catholic school my whole life. And in my high school, I was the VP for community service for like the junior and senior classes. So to graduate, you had X amount of hours that you needed to do as a junior, X amount of hours you need to do as a senior. And I would organize programs for people to do volunteer work. And one of the things that they did for seniors is that you took a trip, and I could be saying it wrong, but I believe the name of it was called Emmaus. And so all of the Marist Catholic schools throughout the country, or I think it's mostly like the Northeast, the tri-state, you would go on this retreat, And then it was like a week-long retreat. And towards the end of it, they had this really interesting experience that was a couple of hours long. It was in the evening. So you would eat, have dinner, do all of that. You would go into the church. It was like a formal like prayer. And then they would take you on a walk. And along the walk, there was candle lights on both sides. It was about a 30-minute walk in the pitch black dark in the woods. So you're with everybody, but they ask you to be completely silent. You go through this walk and you're just walking in the woods. It's safe, right? And you're seeing all these things and you start being left alone with your thoughts. But then what happens is when you come back in, you're still in this big room, completely silent, and they hand you an envelope. And in the envelope, they're like, so the rules are, they're like, please find a private moment. This is just for you to reflect. Find a corner, find a chair, find some place where you can just be there by yourself, and then open your packet. But when you open your packet, there's a bunch of letters, and there's letters from like your parents, your cousins, your teachers, your aunts. They reach out to your community.
Yeah.
And so after this like whole hour of truly like silence and introspection, you're giving these like letters, and some of them are, people like words of encouragement.
Yeah.
Some of them are people telling you like really incredible stories about how you impacted their lives. And this is us as like, I'm a 17-year-old, right? And I'm like, oh my goodness. And like, having that moment was like really impactful for me. And I still remember that to this day. So while everybody was like freaking out about Aaron Rodgers doing it, it took me back to that moment. And I remember how, not spiritual,
Right.
Like I guess I'm more spiritual than religious. But it takes you back to that point of where like kind words matter.
Yeah.
And as a man, typically, and as men, we don't always have those spaces where we're hearing people say, yo, I appreciate you. Right.
Yeah.
And I know Pete probably heard me say this all the time, and like it's become part of my rhetoric. But when I say thank you to people, but more often than not, I'll usually say I appreciate you, and I genuinely mean it. So I don't really use thank you a lot. I usually I appreciate you, because it's also a matter of finding those opportunities to acknowledge people, and it's not just like a pass by saying. It's a little bit more intentional. So if I end up in a darkness retreat, I'm happy to come back on and share those experiences. But the goal is to really like decompress and reflect on kind of who I am, and also like who I want to be and how I want to show up for friends, family, work, all of the things. Right.
That's awesome.
I think it's true. I think I've had those moments also where you're in your thoughts. And I think those have been when I've had the most profound revelations about myself, and have sort of been able, given the time and the space, to work through things that were sort of like plaguing my brain, and not fully resolve them, but sort of like, at least on some level work through them a little bit. And I do, I think I've mentioned this before, is like, when I was my teenager, I did a lot of psychedelics.
Oh, yep.
And as an adult, when I did it, and the intention was more recreational, but I realized as an adult that, as a kid, I had a pretty fucked up childhood, and it kind of like, I battled with depression as a teenager. But I do remember the moment after the first time that I did do psychedelics. And in general, a lot of my, it was, with a bunch of friends, and we're all together. I wasn't really I became very introverted, and I realized that because, flip side, I've been considering kind of doing like a psychedelics retreat as well, to kind of like deal with sort of stuff that's going on through my head, or going through my head now. Because I think back to those, as a teenager, how the experience I had, and typically I'm talking, to this, but typically I remembered as when I did psychedelics as a teenager, I barely spoke. I was amongst people. I'd be also, I worked in nightlife as a teenager a lot, so a lot of times I'd be around amongst thousands of people, but I wouldn't be talking to any of them. I was talking to a few people who I knew, people who worked at the club, but I'll sort of be doing my own thing. But during those moments is where I was able to make certain revelations and kind of really go through like the catalog of shit in my brain and work through it. And I remember the first time I did it, waking up the next day, and to this day I feel like when I woke up I felt like a different person. I feel like there was a Pete from yesterday and the Pete of today, and I was able to feel and this is like not me trying to push psychedelics on anyone, this is my own personal experience. I felt more connected to the world, and I felt how because most of my life I felt very isolated and separate from everything, and on the peripheral of like society, I guess, in general. But I felt more connected with the world and more in tune, and also I saw more beauty in the world. And it was in those moments where I realized now is because I had the ability, and also I'm sure the psychedelics helped as well, kind of rewire my brain a little bit to help me work through a lot of the shit that I was dealing with.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think that there's times where you need that time and space to be in your thoughts, but I also don't think that time can extend past a certain. There's a threshold for that because ultimately I feel like humans are not meant to be alone.
Correct.
It's like that's why there's always pairings of men and women, or there's tribes. If we were meant to be alone, we never would have survived.
Yeah.
From like basic caveman or to whatever hunter gatherers. So I think there's that balance where you need the time to kind of be alone, and I think it's beneficial. But also to what Brian said is, I don't think we're not meant to be alone indefinitely.
Right.
Like that's why one of the things they say when people are incarcerated, like when they go into solitary confinement, like I feel like anything. I mean, I've never experienced that. I've never been locked up, but anything I've read or I've heard people say is like it's like a fucking torture.
Yeah.
And people go into there one way and they come out and they're like permanently like fucked up from it.
Right.
Like it's had like like this traumatizing effect on them.
Yeah. You leave yourself in your thoughts for too long, and it's super dangerous. I feel like you go in there, it's like a file cabinet. You open the file cabinet, your files and folders are your thoughts, and you go through them and you look at them and you observe, and you should sort of like, maybe get them in order. Maybe you don't need to do anything at the moment, but, you put them away, and then you escape that time. But if you stay in there, you're stuck. It's super dangerous, yeah.
Inception, you're like 3 levels in.
Yeah, exactly.
Traumatizing. When I was 12, that dog ran by. Oh, way too far back.
But yeah, I mean, honestly, I think if you went on that darkness retreat, let me know. I'd love to hear your experience about that.
I'm all for it, man. And I'm not into psychedelics. I'm sure that people that go on a darkness retreat double up.
Yeah. Oh man.
Well, it's there's like, and I don't want to go on these crazy tangents, but everything I've read and things I've read about these history, there's theories that say that the way that the brain, the transition from like being like primates to more like and the way we kind of evolved, it may have been attributed to psychedelics because
interesting.
I guess in general, when these primates would eat mushrooms, not really realizing the impact, it gives them more of a sense of community, and it helped them, their brains operate in a different way that helped them start utilizing tools or thinking of new ways to do things.
Interesting.
So and it like triggered this more creative side or more kind of innovative side of the brain. So it's interesting how they say, 1 second, let's pause.
And on that note, let me take a quick break.
And now we're back. We had a little delivery interruption.
Yeah. Thank
Fuck
you, Amazon. Thank you, and fuck you at the same time.
So I guess to kind of continue what I was saying regarding mushrooms or psychedelics. So there's this also another theory or hypothesis that this guy. So there was this guy. I can't remember his name. I'm sort of paraphrasing. He was he worked for the Vatican. He was a religious scholar. He worked at the Vatican for 20, 30 years. He was also a linguist. So he was tasked at the Vatican to translate the remembrance of what the Dead Sea Scrolls that they had recovered.
Wow.
So that was his job, and he did it for like almost 15 years. And in his studies and his evolution, he ended up leaving the Vatican because he realized that, or in his assessment and what he translated was that Christianity was based on pagan rituals, pagans fertility rituals that revolved around mushrooms. And because I guess apparently after rain subsides, maybe about 15-20 minutes later, mushrooms would grow, and they would grow very large very quickly. So then earlier, I guess humans thought that when it rained, it was like the gods ejaculating on the earth.
Oh shoot.
And that was what they were coming up.
Yeah.
And so I mean it's a pretty crazy theory, and I'm like, it's out there. But I have to give the guy, he worked at the Vatican, he became a linguist, and then this is what his assessment was like. So I mean, it's really easy to just dismiss because it sounds fucking bonkers.
Yeah.
But I'm like, the guy wasn't like some random crazy guy in the street.
Right.
He had a product background. I was like, so maybe I'd like to examine that a little more. But yeah, I guess mushrooms have played a big part in religion, history,
Human evolution.
human evolution. Than maybe we think of.
Yeah. It's more fiction than nonfiction, maybe.
Yeah. So yeah.
So with that question, all right, let's pivot a little bit.
So kids on mushroom. I'm kidding.
No, that's 100% where I was going to go next, right? It's like, 2025, we have a lot more information and scientific proof. It's like, we always attribute, not to get religious, but we always attribute things that we can't figure out to God. And then society figures it out. And then they're like, oh yeah, that wasn't God. We're actually, the planet's round, right?
Yeah.
So, but, now that we do have quite a lot more information, recreational drugs are becoming legal in certain states. How do you guys feel about like drugs, psychedelics, especially when it comes to being a parent and like introducing that concept to our kids?
I think I have an extensive knowledge of drugs. I did a lot of drugs as a teenager. I was surrounded by drugs for a lot of my life. I think I'm all for, if you're an adult, do whatever the fuck you want. Like I'm like a pure libertarian. I'm like, even I know, like they say, I'm like, legalize everything. And I know that's going to fuck up some people along the way, but I feel like if that's what you want to do, do it.
Yeah.
I do think that, and I've experienced this, I think marijuana, who like, psychedelics, hallucinogens, with certain people will fuck them up. I've seen firsthand. So like, I used to work in nightlife a lot. So I went to a lot of raves. I think when I was a teenager, I was, because of my lack of supervision and my lack of like, whatever, I was sort of on my own. I did whatever the fuck I wanted. So I would go to, school, and after school I'd go home and sleep. And then I go out, and I was working at Limelight, working at the building, working at these big clubs. So I knew, so a lot of my friends were always trying to like, use me to kind of get into it. Like, yeah, I got you, just come in. So I had this one person who wanted to come to this rave, and I saw him outside. He's like, hey, what's up? And I haven't seen him since junior high school. I'm like, yeah, of course, I got you. Come in. And then he's like, oh, I'm looking, to do some, maybe mushrooms or acid. I'm like, yeah, talk to this guy, whatever, And then he did it, and that fucking flipped the switch in him. And I saw him at the end of the night, and I'm like, oh shit, this guy is losing his shit. Yeah. And he was like, throwing his sneakers up in the air in the club. And then, mind you, it was like, this might have been like a rave where the cops shut it down. So they're having, they're escorting everyone out and telling everyone, to leave the building. And he was still like, off the wall.
He was still tripping.
Yeah, he was still tripping. And he ended up punching a female cop outside. Oh, shit. And those cops fucked his shit up. Like, he got a beat down and he got arrested. And I felt bad. I'm like, oh fuck, I kind of enabled him. I kind of like helped him. Yeah. But I heard from like another friend that he was never the same after that. And he went to like, he went to the psych ward, and from there he was never the same. He never really recovered. And I was like, and I've heard other stories about marijuana, especially, like the marijuana we have today with high levels of THC and psychedelics triggering or like being like the way to trigger schizophrenia in people who may be predisposed to it. Right? So I feel like it's not for everyone, but I'm like, so for kids, I'm like, would I recommend kids doing psychedelics as teenagers? Fuck no. I think if you want to try it as an adult, I think if you've had trauma in your life, or you're suffering from some PTSD, or you've had really fucked up things you're trying to work through, it could be, I think for me it worked, and it could be anecdotal, and and it's really, I'm not a medical professional, but I think it'd be beneficial. But I also think like it can also, like, certain people shouldn't do it, and it could fuck you up permanently and flip that switch. And once that switch is flipped, like, that's it. Like, you're, like, you caught crazy.
Yeah. Right. I have no experience with psychedelics, and very, very little experience with marijuana. I mean, I've had a few cigarettes, and it was mostly because, I'm peer pressure. I'm with a couple of people, and they're like, "Yo, I have a
tobacco cigarettes."
Yeah, tobacco cigarettes. Yeah, it's
just like calling like marijuana's like. Like, you mean a joint?
Cig weed.
Cigarette. In the words of Chris Tucker. Yeah, exactly. No, but I didn't even smoke. I took my first puff from a joint already in my 30s.
Oh,
That was already
wow.
I was like, I didn't mess with it because I was surrounded by it as a kid.
Sure.
And I was like, I just didn't want to get involved. I didn't even have I think my first real drinks until I was like maybe 21, 22. I've had like beer, but it was sort of like what's it called? The spritzers, like the
Smirnoff
the
Ice.
Smirnoff
and,
Ice.
yeah.
Oh man, those were popping. Those were popping to me back then.
I'm telling you.
I was like, yeah, exactly. You're as litty.
Early 2000s, we were on it.
Yeah. But other than that, I think what I started to explore was edibles. And the first time I took edibles, it was unfortunately a bad trip because I took too much and I didn't know how to pace it. And Pete knows this story. I'm not going to repeat it, but it is on the air. I'm not going to repeat it, but off off the air, I'll let you know. But yeah, I had a really, really, really bad trip and I thought I was going to have a heart attack. Sure. And I was like on all fours on my bed. I was like trying to get water. I could barely move. My head end up hitting a TV, and that's the best part of it. But anyways, after that, I was like, I wanted to sort of explore it again. It was mainly so I can like get some rest. So I was like, let me get some, THC edibles with CBD. And I started out really slow. So it was like, 5 milligrams and 10. And the most I'll take is 50. Anything other than that, I feel like my anxiety goes up and I start feeling my heartbeat and I'm like, oh my God, am I going to throw up? And I'm experiencing all these things. So I know personally for me, psychedelics would probably fuck me up. Maybe if it was like a super microdose, but I don't even know what a microdose is for that. I'd have to I'd have to be in a room with like other people who know this stuff in order for me to feel comfortable. As far as kids, I don't have enough experience to say. I mean, for my own kid, I definitely wouldn't recommend it, but we'll see how things change in the future. I guess as we learn more about these things.
Yeah, and also I think it's indicative of the kid. I feel like I try to be objective, and I feel like most parents have like blinders when it comes to their child, and I see it all the time when kids do shitty things. I mean, I've experienced myself with my own kid. And I have to sort of like realize, my kid was being an asshole.
Yeah.
But a lot of parents, like don't have that ability. They just won't. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But I feel like I see certain traits in Hunter that make me afraid. Like especially this new, which I think might be seems to be like prevalent now. This like addiction to iPads and cell phones and all these online games, and it's like, and I know it's like you said before, like the dopamine hits.
Yeah.
And I see this behavior, and I'm like, oh, I know this behavior. I was like, yeah, I've seen junkies before. I know junkies firsthand. I'm like, I know addicts. I'm like, this is like an addict behavior. So my fear is, and also I experienced that because I was exposed to so many, drugs and like drug use in my teenage years. I knew a lot, like dozens of people who never made it out. Either they ended up ODing and dying from getting into heroin and getting into like, all types of other crazy drugs, or, segued. I mean, some of them, and I mean, kids I knew in high school, girls I knew in high school ended up being sex workers. And then that led to like incarceration, murder, all types of crazy shit. And so I don't know. It's like, but also I know from my own experience, it has a lot to do with personality. I was like, I did probably enough drugs to kill a small village.
Yeah.
And I say that not even like hyperbolically, like straight up. But I know for me, luckily, my personality, I reached a certain point, like a saturation point, where I'd be like, I'm done. I don't want. I mean, it'd be at the end of the night, it'd be 3, 4 in the morning. I'm like, I don't want anything else.
Yeah.
I'm done, and I could just walk away. And whereas other people would go on for days and days, and then like and I luckily, even like, even drinking or smoking, I smoked when I was younger. I was able to quit. It wasn't even hard. Or drinking, I'm like, so I know that could be a personality trait. I also know for some people, I know people who have OD'd, who like have started out smoking weed and end up shooting heroin, a couple years later. And I know that's a big jump from weed to heroin. And I don't think that's necessarily that weed leads to heroin.
Yeah, it's not as common.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I can see how like certain personality or certain personality types, like things like I always kind of like out of pride I say nothing really got its hooks in me. As far as like drug wise. Yeah. So I'm lucky, but not everyone is that fortunate.
Yeah, I'm trying to remain open to navigating that space. My dad was incarcerated for a large portion of my life due to selling drugs and some drug use. And he came out, and I had some time with him after I had graduated college, and we lived together for 2.5, almost 2.5, almost 3 years. So I had a chance to like really get to know my dad and understand who he was and what he did. But what was interesting was that I don't have an addictive personality. So while he struggled to try to kick something that was giving him a hard time, for me, I smoked cigarettes for maybe about 1.5 years just because I decided to. And one day I decided I didn't want to anymore. And I threw the whole pack away and never smoked a cigarette since. Right. So I, for lack of a better word, lucked into not having a personality that gets addicted to things.
Yeah.
And so for me, like growing up similar to you, Brian, like I grew up around weed in like the Black community. Like weed is like the main drugs. Anything after that, they're names and terms that people are like, whoa, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Had my first drink, smoked weed when I was super, super young. I was like, oh, this is not for me. And so when I got to college and I started to see more people doing like real drugs, I was like, whoa, this is a whole different world. Yeah. It's like, people are microdosing, people are like taking different pills and, doing different like mushrooms and things like that. I was like, whoa, but that was just never for me. But again, as more information came out, I became more open to not necessarily trying them myself, but being, to your point, Pete, like if people need that as like if in a controlled stance, I'm all for it. But I think, as we transition into being a parent, my main thing is like education. Like I don't want my child to ever feel forced into something. Like if you decide and you consider all the factors, including what the negatives are going to be, and you make the active choice, I'd much rather that than you to tell me, oh no, there was this girl and she recommended, like, no, cool. Like if you're in it to impress the girl and you know that her parents might come home, your parents might find out, you might get arrested, and you considered all those things, fine. You made an adult decision, you deal with adult repercussions, right? But so I'm not necessarily turned off to it, but for me, it's really about how much information can I give them to be able to make informed decisions early on. And I think, when we think back, right, you think about the kids in high school and somebody else, I'm big on like people's like hypotheses on life and things like that. Somebody said that the high school experience is the penultimate kind of existence of human beings. They're just, some people's roles change. Some people go from one role to another as they move into like the workforce, but the same like typecast personalities still exist, right? You have your academics, you have your high performers, you have your underachievers. Like it literally just transitions into roles. And so I want to make sure that when Moss is navigating through like high school, when those things start to become more prevalent, given the school we're in, where there's a lot of access, there's very little parental involvement at some point. It's going to be like you're with the nanny and the nanny for a week, right? There are going to be really easy opportunities for him to be exposed to that. And if he goes into those spaces, I want him to go into it and make those decisions informed. I think that's where my like landing point as a parent is I can deal with the repercussions if you can. Type thing.
The exposure to that is only a matter of time. So it's like, do you teach them, or do you mention it? Do you make them aware of it before they experience it out in the real world, so they know exactly how to navigate, when that situation comes across? I think that's super important.
Yeah, I think that's big for me because like my mom's a teacher, right? I was always on the academic side, but like I grew up, I saw crack being cooked in the kitchen, right? And if you looked at me, if you saw the way I dress, if you knew my background, that's not what would cross your mind, right? But like that was my normal. And, I was around it. I saw it. Was I taking part in it? No. Was I with the people that were doing it? Yes.
Yeah.
And so I was able to kind of navigate out of it. But, not all kids have the ability to circumvent those situations. And, sometimes you need that extra coaching. You need that extra prodding from a mentor, from somebody that has experience to say, you might come across this. And if you do, like, let's talk about it. What does that feel like for you? What do you think? And understanding where their kind of like starting point is.
Sorry, go ahead, Pete. You're gonna say.
I think that is I think the being informed education is such an important, critical part of like the child raising process. I think it's also challenging because I think I mentioned this before, and maybe not. We're discussing our children. So Hunter had this assignment where it was like this Greek mythology about this king and like how he ruled, and and how he ultimately wanted to he spent his entire existence trying to find eternal life. Unbeknownst to him, everyone keeps telling him, no, just appreciate what you have. But he just kept going on this same path and failing. And ultimately ended up he wasted his life trying to achieve this thing that was never achievable. And so one of the questions that they posed, which I think was such a crazy philosophical question for a sixth grades student was what do you think is better to learn, the easy way or the hard way how to do things? And I asked Hunter, and he was like, and I was like, because he has a hard time expressing himself, especially during writing, so I had to sort of prompt him and help him with his homework. I'm like, all right, so we're discussing it. I'm like, all right, so what do you think? And he's like, no, the hard way is better. I'm like, really? And I'm like, why do you say that? He's like, no, because sometimes you have to, what do you say? You have to experience things yourself, and you just have to do it yourself. And when he said it to me, I swear I was like, it was like a slap in the face. I was like, holy shit. I'm like, this is going to be my life with this kid. And his mind, and this is in my life in general with him, is he has his way, and no matter what I say, he's going to do it. And his way, he'll end up in a fucked up position because of doing it his way. But no matter what I say, he's like, okay. Still does it his way.
That's his learning path.
And I realized, I'm like, fuck. I'm like, this is going to be a hard road. I'm like, because chances aren't, no matter even all the experience I have in my life, and I'm trying to pass on to him, the majority, he might absorb some, but the majority, he's just going to do his own thing. Yeah. And what do I do? And that in itself is my biggest fear. I was like, because I think, I had a discussion with another friend of mine, is I have friends who are very affluent families who never really had big stress in their life. And not to minimize their experience, but they didn't see the things that I potentially saw. So in their mind, oh yeah, my kids, they kind of just float through life. And in my mind, I'm like, no, I have all these fears and anxieties because I've seen some horrific shit. Right. I've seen people killed. I've seen people shot. I've seen people die. I've seen people, I've gotten beat. I've seen people get beat. I've seen a lot of horrific things. And so of course, your fear is you know what you know. Yeah. And your experience is your experience. And that's what ultimately forms your perspective and views and your fears in the world. And I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, the potential for his life to go sideways is so great. And that's one of my biggest anxieties is oh no, this kid is he's going to have to learn everything the hard way. Yeah. And there's not much I'm going to be able to do to fix that. Yeah. Unless be there for him. But at some point, if he zigs when he should zag, it can be something that I can't really help him. He's going to have to take those repercussions. And I think that would be ultimately, I think I would ultimately, I know, feel as the biggest failure to him if somehow his life is fucked up. Or he makes a decision where I feel even now there's times he makes decisions and I'm like, what could I have done to help him make a better decision? Or I'll put it, is it on me because I did this? We had an incident at school, which I feel I thought about bringing it up but it's still so raw. I'm still trying to process it. But on Friday, he was at the playground with some of his friends, and two of his friends, and and the other boys came, and he kind of knows them. We kind of knows them. I know one of them from the baseball team he's on, but those four boys held him and pantsed him, and twice, and then he kind of walked away. And in my mind, I'm like, why didn't you fuck him up? And he's like, oh, because I didn't want to hurt them, and it was four of them, and I was like. And in my mind thinking, and I was like, wow, what did I do to him? But in my mind, I'm like, yo, you've seen Hunter. He could fight. Yeah, he can fight. I'm like, why didn't he fucking fuck these kids up? And I thought to myself, I'm like, and then I thought, well, does he not have the confidence? Does he not have in him? I was like, and I know it's something maybe kids have to go through. And even when I was driving today, and the last time I was thinking about it, I've been kind of it's been keeping me up. I'm like, what did I do? It's is it something I did? The way I raised him, did I yell at him too much? Am I too hard on him? Did I hurt his confidence? Right. Why is he not why did he handle these things this way? Right. And so I kind of put it on myself, and maybe it's too much. Maybe it's not on me, all of it. But I do take, I feel I take ownership of it. I'm like, what did I do to not enable him to be to you? And maybe is that a good thing that he didn't beat these kids up? I don't know. you know. But in my mind, I'm like, I'm from the streets. I'm like, if some kids would do that to me, I was like, even though I've gotten jumped before, and like, I'm like, oh, okay. It was like 5-6 guys on me. They kicked the shit out of me, and then I was like, fuck that. Lo and behold, I caught each one of them by themselves and beat them mercilessly to the point that when they saw me, I'm like, yeah, you can jump me again, but when I catch you alone, I'll fucking kill you.
Yeah.
And then to the point that they would see me and be like, "Oh shit," and walk the other way, and not something like I'm like proud of it, but I'm like, no, fuck that. Like I'm gonna find every one of yous, and like if it's like I remember my mind thinking, if it takes my like if I have to fucking die, I'm gonna get my revenge.
You're gonna get one of them.
Yeah.
Well, there's a couple components to that too that like really makes me kind of think about, that situation is like, I know that a lot of the coaches at the gym. So for those that don't know, Hunter, I met Pete at Seton Gym, the Muay Thai gym in Astoria, and our kids took class together. Schedules are changing a little bit, but yeah, that's where we first connected. And I remember Joel, he was really big on your training here for like the discipline portion of it. Hunter punches like a freight truck. Like I've heard him on the pads, and he legitimately sounds like an adult hitting punching pads. And so there could be a component of Hunter reflecting back to the coaches and their training, because absolutely Hunter would have taken all of their heads off. Like I have no doubt about that. So like, what's the turnout? Is it like there's how we feel about the situation as a parent, but also like, how does Hunter feel about it, right? Like maybe he got pants and he was like, whatever, right? You know what I mean? And we're looking at it like, like I would have been super embarrassed because I don't know how Hunter felt about it, but I know that Hunter probably wasn't intimidated by them. I
think he felt humiliated, and I think on some level he might have felt intimidated. I think he plays his cards close to his chest. It's hard to get stuff out of him. But I know when he came home, I mean, it was actually a weekend that his mom was taking him, and so she was. I mean, I guess he wanted to go with his friends after school and play in the playground, which is like a new thing for him, kind of giving him some independence, some autonomy.
Yep.
So she waited in the car for him, like by my house, and he normally like walks from school. It's only like 10-minute walk or 7-minute walk, to my building. And when he got there, they came up, and I was like, "Oh, you okay? You have to use the bathroom?" And he was crying. I'm like, "What happened?" And he told me, so I know it hurt him, and he was like, and then, but I think from what I pull, I think he might have felt somewhat intimidated because it was 4 of them, and only him, and also I think he ultimately felt really humiliated because everyone that was in the park saw him getting pants 2 times, and so I'm not sure if he just wanted to escape that situation because he was humiliated or whatever.
Probably. Yeah. I mean, they're still super young. He's still super young. I would maybe even ask him, kind of what his thought process was in that moment, and reflect on it and have a moment of just like chatting about it afterwards to kind of peel back the layers of who these kids are. How close is he with them? Are they that much older? Right. Like, and just kind of understanding the layers of it, because, I haven't had that situation yet, but Moss is he's the kid who's like, has a good amount of talent in anything, right? He's never been in a situation where he just sucks. Right?
Yeah.
You know how some kids you see him on like the basketball
naturally
court.
talent,
You see him on a baseball field, you're like, ooh, you should not be here.
Yeah.
He might not be the best, but he'll never be the worst.
Yeah.
Right. But he's very gentle by nature. So he has skills in the Muay Thai gym. He's able to hit the pads. He has really solid technique. But he's very gentle. He's a very gentle soul, and he prefers not to. And thinking about a scenario like if that happened to him, I could see him being similar to Hunter and like balling up and crying, not because he like couldn't fight, because personality wise, he's like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Like, can I? Yes. But do I want to do that? Not really. And so, one of the things that we say, my wife and I are really strong on, he's like, words twice. You get 2 opportunities to use your words. The first time is, hey, I'm not cool with that. The second time is, you will not do that again. After that, I already told you that you will not do that again. And this is the proof of it. So that was our way to acknowledge the fact that he's a gentle person.
Yeah.
So it gives him that space to verbalize, step back, verbalize again. But at some point, like, you're solely responsible for your own safety, whether mental, emotional, physical. And we always joke around, and I say it as a joking way, but I mean it dead seriously. I was just like, and I say that to my wife and I say it to my son. I was like, you have to protect my son. So I look at Masi and I go, you have to protect my son. And I look at my wife and I was like, my wife can get very emotional sometimes about things. And I was just like, be nice to my wife. I look at her and be nice to my wife, because, we all have those moments where we're really hard on ourselves or really thinking about things. And, when you brought up that story, it really makes me like reflect on, like, again, like, did I prepare him enough? Because eventually something of that ilk will happen. And, that's that preemptive coaching of how to navigate that space.
I think that's one of the challenges. I mean, for me personally, I feel like, when and I brought it up today when we were driving in, you asked, like, oh, well, what prompted you to start this podcast? And ultimately, I felt like I wanted to, have some really bad, sad experiences with, like, dads I was close with, committing suicide. But also I realized, and this has kind of like been more prevalent now as it's evolved a little bit, is that it's my own feelings of not being enough or not being good enough or not like, and I think I mentioned before is I felt like my son deserves more than me as a father, and trying to become that and trying to find the resources to become that.
It's like that never-ending North Star, right? And these spaces are super important to kind of share. And I think it's a natural challenge for fathers to feel like adequacy. Right? Am I enough? Do I make enough? Am I fit enough? Am I communicating enough? Am I emotionally available enough? Am I tough enough? Right. Something happens to my family. Can I protect my family? Right. There's this constant state of chasing adequacy. And I think that's why these spaces are hyper important, because it's important to understand that we're all dealing with different issues, but the same context of issues, right? And how do we use these spaces to support each other? And the reason why, when you first invited me, like, I didn't even like blink. It was a matter of like scheduling, but I was like, absolutely, is because I also personally, and this is something that my wife has been pushing me to, and she's probably my biggest advocate, is one of the things that I've been wanting to do for years now, is really start a community for fathers. And I've seen other online communities before, and some of them are not as active as I would like, right? And I get it; it's a lot of work on people's schedules. But I thought about, like, what does it look like to make it a little bit easier, and have that community to say, hey, maybe it's once a quarter, but we're gonna plan a easy trip for everybody. Whatever you have. 2-3 months to plan. Everything is planned out, but we'll get 2 or 3 buses and go to Dorney Park for the day. Right. But it's specifically tailored because there's so many programs tailored around women. And women's support groups. And like, this is like, no, your wives get a break today. All the dads, we're going to round up. We'll go kick it. And, we'll have a couple of hours, but dad and the kids will come hang out, and we'll build that community. And it doesn't have to be every day, right? Because people have jobs, people have hobbies, people have things to do. Navigating a child's schedule in New York City is bonkers.
Forget it.
Absolutely bonkers, bro. I see social calendar has me stressed out. But I know that I personally, this year is a big year for me in trying to build out hobbies. And even with that coming up, I think my community is hyper important to me, and having that dad community, because most of my friends, I was one of the first to have a kid, right? So so that's a whole nother dynamic that we can get into, but I had to kind of be the one to navigate it solo, because I didn't see a lot of dads. And now my close friend groups, they're starting to have kids, and so Masi's 7, and we have one that's 2 months, or no, 1 month now. We have another one that's a couple of months old. So, he's the big, in the Philippines, they have names for like the oldest siblings. He's the big kuya, right? He's the big brother. He's the big brother. But I want to make sure that, we also have these spaces where, and I was telling you, Brian, that my son Masai would love Zach. Like, his interests align. he physically looks just like him, but the bigger version. So a lot of those things and having those moments to like see yourself are so important.
Yeah.
So I would love to kind of expand on that community specifically for dads, to give dads an outlet to say, yo, the kids are playing, but like, bro, we all going through the same thing.
Yeah,
We're all
exactly.
trying to figure it out.
Yep.
And something else, you know, like another guest we had on, my friend Jonathan, he mentioned something that was so important that I think it's lacking. And I think it could be maybe, I mean, I think for me, I have like very limited family. I don't know about, you know, I don't know if Brian has an extensive family. I don't know about your family situation, but it's very limited, his exposure to people. And there's some things that I realize now that I can teach my son and I can help him, but the dynamic is different. I can help him with certain things, but certain things, it's very hard to, like, if I'm helping him with his homework, it's challenging because if I make one little comment, the way he takes it from me is much different than if Brian was helping him with his homework or someone else, like a third party. And one of the things my friend Jonathan said, the importance of having like a external male mentor outside. And it's something that like, I never had that. I'm not sure if you ever had that. I think it's something that's lacking. I think like in the past, it might have been uncles or, you know, that maybe like that kind of
Families
role.
are shringing.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's a fact.
that's true.
Families are shrinking. Families are dispersed throughout the country. It's not a bad thing, but it's true, right? And, you know, in the world that we grew up, especially as like millennials before the age of technology, we grew up in microcultures, right? So it's like you had your people on the street, right?
Yeah.
And in the building, you would have, you know, I can go up to the 12th floor and see this person. I can go to the 6th floor and see this person. And some of that is starting to go away. So to your point, like having those people that you can turn to is super, super impactful.
And having other positive male role models or presence in like I think that's important for girls as well. But I think girls, their experience is different than boys. I think they have more perils, but they have, I feel like, more resources. There's more things tailored, like girl power. I never heard anyone say boy power. You know what I mean? Right. And that's okay. I mean, I think it's important that like, you know, women also are present and they're empowered as well. But I think that that's sort of gone by the wayside. There's very limited resources for boys, and I say that, and I don't mean to diminish the challenges of girls and women empowered and feminism and all of those things. But I think, yeah, you're right. I think there's a certain space and a certain, I don't want to say like neutering, but there is a certain neutering of boys that seems to be happening now in the past couple of years where, you know, like, yeah, boys, I mean, I'm not going to justify any shitty behavior, but there's certain things that boys interact differently than girls do. And the way they interact and the way they behave is different because physiologically they're different and they're ultimately probably, I mean, I'm not a biologist, but chances are our brains are wired differently. And the way our thought process, and that's ultimately how we evolved. I mean, we evolved from like these cavemen hunting, gathering, and then like, you know, and men would go out. I mean, if you look at traditional in Africa or more in any indigenous tribes, I mean, I'm sure there are tribes where women are hunting, but mostly the men are going out hunting. So it's not like a thing of them being less than. It's just like the roles are different.
Right.
And everyone plays their role in society, and each role is important.
Yeah. I have, you know, one of the questions I was going to ask before, I was going to be like, what is a fear that you have for your child, like a real genuine fear? And you had touched on it, and you know, I was thinking, Zach does have, he has good role models, adults, you know, males in his life, enough that I think it's you know, to keep him on a good straight path. My one fear is always kind of like, I think he experienced going to Canada and being away from us for such a long time that at the moment he's like 15, 16 and he can like confidently travel by himself
like,
somewhere.
Deuces.
He's going to be like,
this.
yo, I am out. I'll see you next year. I'm going to college here. I'm going to college there. I mean, that's like one of my genuine fears. I'm like, I just don't want him to be like involved with like the wrong crowds. And I think it's important to sort of be in that space where you experience it, but you know how to navigate it. But I have a feeling he's going to be like a total, like, I want to go to this party. I want to travel. And I think it's a good thing for him to travel. I think it's a good, you know, just for anything in you know, experience cultures and life and different people. But I think as soon as he has the opportunity to sort of like be out, he's gonna disappear, and I won't see him for a while.
Wow. And it's scary. I feel because the fear of like, I think ultimately I think because of our experiences, and a lot of them are probably shared.
Yeah.
And the things that we've seen, we know how bad things can get, and you pray that your child doesn't somehow fall into those.
Yeah.
And like and so I think it's a big fear. Like, and I think it's, for me, it gives me a lot of anxiety. I'm like, I don't want any part of my life to have to mirror that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
or at least most of it.
All right.
right. It's so funny that you said that, Brian, because we're completely on the opposite end of the track. We're like, I hope that one day, but it goes back to that question of intention, right?
Yes.
Did you think this out? I'll take a step back, share a story, and then I'll kind of share our fear. But one of the parents, one of the affinity groups at his school, beautiful, beautiful woman, Black woman who has 3 kids, really, really well spoken. She actually also has a podcast on parenting.
Oh, cool.
She's incredible. But my wife went to her home and they hosted like the Black parents at the school, and they had this really nice dinner and had a chance to socialize and just connect. And one of her daughters, I believe it was her daughter, decided to leave the school that we're currently in. Again, it's an elite private school in New York City, but wanted to go to the #1 school in the country. It's a boarding school in the Northeast. But her daughter came to her and said, hey, in 8th grade, she's like, I want to go here for college, or for high school. Here are my reasons why. This is what it is. This is what I want to do. And had a full proposal for her mom in 8th grade, right? So she was like, okay, I'll pull her out and send her to this school. So she ended up leaving. And when she was having the conversation with Ida, my wife, she said, at some point, you can guide your kids, but at some point you want to give them space to kind of guide themselves.
Right.
Right. And so we were like, oh, that's really interesting. And part of the reason why we wanted him in the school is to have this international world view of life. So if one day he turns to me and says, hey, I want to move to, I don't know, Zimbabwe and study there, we'd be like, all right, deuces. Like, but if you ask my wife, she'd be like, well, I guess we're getting a pied à terre in Zimbabwe, right? Like, because I need to be by my baby, but I want him to go. I think for me, as a father, I think for me is really my biggest fear is for him to somehow lose who he is along the way. I think, I come from a big family. I absolutely love kids. Yeah. I really, really do. But middle class family in New York City, it's really expensive. Yeah. It's really tough. And there's been a lot of decisions that were made along the way to kind of guide him and to help him succeed. And there's been a lot of sacrifices and a lot of tough conversations and editing life. Yeah. Like, no to this, yes to this, because we want to build that out. And because we have one, we're able to put a lot of focus and put a lot of resources and a lot of dynamism to him. Yeah. My worst fear is that all falls by the wayside because of something, and he ends up, in a space where he is not happy. Regardless of what happy is, it's not financial for us. Yeah. It's not experiential for us, but like ultimately we want him to succeed and, to pour all those resources in, and for him to like come out of it and just not be happy is an absolute fear of mine. And happiness can, show itself in success, right? Maybe you're a hedge fund manager and you're caking in it and, maybe that's what happiness is. Or if you're just kind of traveling the world and experiencing life, if that's your happiness, great. But I think for me, I want him to be able to identify what that is and to be able to live it. Yeah. And if he can't do that, I would be crushed. Yeah. Absolutely crushed. I'm like, dude.
So you have one kid. Do you plan on expanding your family?
I would.
Is that something?
Yeah. I would love to. But it's hard, right? Yeah. There's a lot of effort that goes into, forget the actual parenting portion of it. Schedules alone is super difficult. So every Saturday, my wife and I sit down and, we review the upcoming week's schedule to make sure that we're aligned if there needs any changes. And then we try to look forward another 2 to 3 weeks and plot it out just so, it's very easy to forget a pickup or, we have a what do you call it? Not a nanny, but what's it called? A tutor, sorry.
Tutor, okay.
A tutor, yeah. We got a tutor, just not that he's behind in anything, but just to make sure he's
Right.
ahead for 2 days a week. And she does pick up 2 days a week. But if something happens to her, like, do we have a backup plan? So for us, it's just about schedule. So like adding an infant to me right now feels impossible. But like I said, I love kids. And if, something happened and that ended up being in the cards, like I would have 5 more if I could.
Yeah.
Right? So.
I think that was my original intention. I had to have 4 because
Yeah.
I was like, I really wanted like 4 because I'm the oldest of 4 kids. It's me. I have 2 brothers and I have a little sister. And then that was like, okay. Then I was realizing I was like, okay, 3, okay, 2, and then 1.
Well, I have 1.
I was like 1 and 1 is enough. And we're not sort of in the realm to. Financially, I don't think we can afford another kid, and we do it like you said. We pour all our resources into Zach. Sometimes I think we spoil him in that sense, but he's he's my only guy. He's the only one I got. I'm like, what else am I gonna give him? So I think with 1 is cool.
I'm okay with spoiling. Listen, listen, right? It's like, don't lose your way. It's like, if we're giving you these things, like, do you appreciate it? Right. Or
those are the important lessons you got to attach.
That's the
to
lesson,
that, yeah.
right? Like, I don't mind. I will give my son anything if it's within my power. And to your kind of comment earlier, Pete, it's like that, like making sure that you're enough. Like, I will give you everything that I have, but like, do you appreciate it, or am I just giving you things? Right?
Yeah.
And trying to instill that sense of like this, that this isn't just yours because it's yours. It's like, no, you're a good person. You're a kind person. You show up. You're social. You do good work at school. Like, of course, why wouldn't I give you everything that you ask for? Right. If I can. If I can't, that's a different conversation,
Right.
I think that's the hard part, is like teaching appreciation.
Appreciation is so important.
Yeah, it's
Setting that expectation too.
yeah, because I think you try, but I don't know. I mean, I think to myself, like, I'm sure Hunter on some level is spoiled and doesn't realize how good he has it. Because, of course, growing up as a kid, like, I didn't have any of this. And
I was like, you get driven to school. I got driven to school as a kid, but I was like, you get driven to school and your back seat is warm. I'm like, my man, you're going from a warm house to a warm car to a warm school. You're only experiencing the cold for like a few seconds.
I remember taking and Ida cannot fathom this. I'm like, I was taking the train to school at like in 2nd grade. She was like, what? I was like, because, everybody took essentially the same route. So it was like, get on your uniform, you walk in the same path as everybody, you get on the train, get off the train, you walk to school. Like, it was normal. And she's like, absolutely not.
I know.
But it's a different age, right? Yeah. So it's interesting.
it is. I mean, I think we say that all the time. I think it's been another common sentiment is that kids nowadays do not have the autonomy that we had as kids. When I was 10 years old, I was walking to school on my own. I was doing everything. I was out on the streets, until the sun went down. Then I went home.
Yeah.
And now, like, I say it a million times, but now if you saw a 10-year-old in the street by himself, chances are, like, you'd probably call the cops.
Calling
Yeah.
child
Like, what the
services.
hell's going on here? Yeah.
And it's a different age, different. But then people say there's more perils now. I don't know if there's more perils. I don't know.
I don't think it is. I think, honestly, the age of technology makes it more challenging. So I think, having instant access is not the best thing all the time. And so if something does happen, we see it right away. Right?
Yes, that's
now
the thing.
What's the app that gives
Citizen?
anxiety?
Citizen, right?
I had to delete it.
Absolutely.
Yo,
not.
same.
Yeah.
Absolutely not, because every single thing, we're not meant to see everything.
Yeah.
Everything that happens. We can know, we can be aware, but like humans aren't meant for that much information at all times.
Yeah.
Right. So the phone at some point, I think, becomes a little bit dangerous because we just have so much access.
There's too much information.
It's too much information overload, right? And so I actually made my wife delete the app because she was just like, this happened on this block. This happened on this block. I'm like, yes, it's going to. The person is out at 2:30 in the morning. There's a reason why people don't like why they say stay inside. Like, there are things that happens at that time of night, and if that's the environment that you want to be, then go out at 2:30 at night. If it's not, stay your butt home, right? But yeah, so I think what happens is, like, generationally, we see all these things happening, and our brain naturally resorts to like worst case scenario.
Yeah.
but we don't also think about the fact that 95% of the time, nothing is happening.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a
Allow the
good
kids
point.
to live their life. Allow the kids to have fun. Allow the kids to learn lessons and teach them how to cross the street. But like, guess what? Eventually they're going to get honked at for being in the street while it's green. Right?
Yeah,
And they'll
yeah.
be like, oh, I almost lost my life.
Yeah.
Not do that. Right. So there's lessons to be learned through, to Hunter's point, learning it, do the difficult portions of it and figuring it out themselves, you know?
Yeah. Something I wanted to ask, you had touched on earlier, and I mean, let me know if it's something you're okay sharing.
Yeah, sure.
You had mentioned that, growing up, your dad was incarcerated.
Yes.
Just wanted to like kind of get more, you elaborate on that and see how did that impact you, like how that affected you as a kid, as a teenager, as an adult, as a father.
Yeah. Huge impact on me. So my dad was in and out of prison for the majority of my life. When I was born, I think he was out until I was like 2 or 3. So I don't really have any younger memories with him. But my dad was clearly the love of my mom's life, right? Like there was no in the prison, out of prison, like that was always a thing. And I remember, I think I might throw off the years a little bit here, but I think I was maybe in like 6th or 7th grade. And I went to the courthouse on 161st in the Bronx and took the bus up state to the prison. And I still remember the photo. Like I have a visual in my head of the exact photo I took, and I had a chance to meet him. And that's an age where you're a little bit more aware, right? So I remember that experience. I remember going through the double gates to get to what looked like the big open cafeteria, and, to sit down and have a conversation with this man who I'm tripping out because I'm looking at him and I'm like, I clearly see myself, right? And, hearing my mother speak, I had a lot of his mannerisms, but I had never met, right? And it's like, I'm looking into this like futuristic window as to like who I can be. So my dad at the end of the day was a great human being, super kind, super gentle, had his things with like drugs and whatever, but he was very, very family focused. So he came out of prison for probably about I would say like three or 4 years as I was transitioning into high school. And so he was out, he had lived with us for a few years, off and on with my mom. And so I had him at home for probably, I would say like 2 years, kind of on and off. And then he went back into prison as I was in high school. And that shook my world because, not having a dad come out and finally, I wouldn't say it was like the most like paternal relationship, but he was a good person. So it was cool to like have him around and shoot things by him and talk and this and the third. He was still struggling with his drug addiction. So some nights he would come home and he was clearly off something really bad. And I would find things around the house and I would see like my mother being upset. And, in junior high school, I'm like, what is happening? Like coming home at like 1 o'clock in the morning and like stumbling into the house and can't function. But in the daytime, he's like so kind and talking to us and like helping me out. And, and so it was like this really like dichotomous thing. And then, so for me, the straw that broke it for me was that he went back in and I was like, you didn't have enough willpower or enough to do to keep yourself out of those situations. And that was really hard for me. And so a lot of my life growing up was really kind of lying to people and lying to other kids about like, oh yeah, your mom, but where's your dad? I would be like, yo, my dad's dead. Like, because having the conversation and saying, hey, my dad is incarcerated starts to bring up more questions. And then it's like, oh, so what's he in jail for? How long has he been in jail? When have you last seen him? And so those kind of like navigating those conversations as a preteen teenager is really challenging. Right. And, so if it was an easier way out for me to just lie and be like, no, my dad died.
Conversation over.
Conversation over. And most people are so much, they're not even at that age. They're not going, well, how did he die? Like, oh my God. All right, let me leave him
Sorry
alone.
about that.
So I was able to navigate those spaces and I was fine growing up as a kid with a single mom because I had known it growing up. That was my normal. So when he went back in, it was like, fine. What became super interesting is that I left away for college. My mother had met somebody while I was in undergrad. They got engaged and moved to Pennsylvania. But my dad had come out while I was in college and started to live with my mom again. Not that they were dating, but like I said, he was clearly the love. If she had it her way, they would be together. And so she was engaged and she was going to marry this man and start a new life. And we were super happy for her. But she would never leave my dad out on the street. So she basically gave him the apartment. And when I came home, I was like, I have this option. Do I move back home to live with this person, right? My father, split the rent, like basically move in with a roommate, or do I move to suburban Pennsylvania where there are no jobs? Like, I don't know anything. No, like, so I made the decision to move back home and live with my father. And I had 2.5, almost 3 years with him as an adult, as a fully formulated adult. And that dynamic was super interesting because at that point, I'm a man.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a preteen anymore. I am a man, right? And so I was able to see that relationship in a new light. I realized how much of my personality stems from this person that I didn't really spend a lot of time with. I'm super family focused. I talked about how my wife says that, you know, you're super like generous with people. And she's like, I've literally seen you give the shirt off your back. And she told me the story. She was like, it's not literally, but like you went to a store, you bought 2 shirts from whatever store you were. One of your roommates was like, hey, T, that's a nice shirt. And you had one in the bag and you literally took it out the bag and gave it to him. It was like, no questions asked. And that's who my father is.
Yeah.
Like everybody that is in his circle, his nickname was Pop. And everybody, his friends, people that were older than him, his cousins, everybody called him Pop because he was like this like father figure to everybody. But then he still had his battles with his drugs, right? Yeah. And so, you know, we kind of got into it as roommates. I'm like, yo, where's my rent money?
Yeah.
Like, we need to live here. There's this like back and forth. And ultimately, you know, right as I started looking for an apartment to like dispatch from that relationship and move out and do my own thing, you know, he ended up passing away. And so it was really tough because I moved in December. No, yeah, the end of November, early December, into an apartment in Queens when I first moved to Queens. He needed to figure something out. And then early that January, he passed away. And so I moved out with all of the anger. Yeah. I moved out with all of the rage. I moved out with all the negative feelings. And it crippled me.
Yeah.
Right? It really made me remember, you know, that time is invaluable. Yeah. Regardless of what it looks like. I didn't know this person super deep, right? I'm 21-ish, 22-ish. And I spent a grand total of maybe 5 years of my entire life broken up with this individual. But I clearly lost some recipes because of my anger, because of my pride, because of that. And, you know, I had to sit with myself with that for a long time. And I think where that manifests itself now is I'm able to tell Masi like about my father. Yeah. I find myself naturally, it's funny, I find myself naturally sometimes when we're like just kicking it, I'll call him Pop. And I like take those moments, I'm like, oh, like why? But I think for me as a parent, what that did was allow me to have really honest and really tough conversations with him early on. You know, that feeling of adequacy, I totally understand. And I remember there was one moment, and the story is going to get botched a little bit because it was a while ago, but I remember having a really challenging conversation with him and telling him like how much I love him and how much I care about him and how much I want to do for him, and how much I want to be present for him. I was like, and as I'm telling him this story, I'm like, because I didn't have a dad. Like I didn't grow up with my dad. My dad wasn't always around, and I'm doing all of these things and being present because I actively want to. Yeah. And in that moment, I felt myself weeping, right? And as I'm telling this story, because I'm telling him, but I'm living my story at the same time. And I think that portion of it was really, it helped me to reflect a little bit further about how much my father meant to me, even in that limited time, but B, how much I'm going to mean for him. The fact that I can be present, the fact that I can give him those lessons, the fact that I can be tough on him, the fact that I can show him how to be emotionally available and it's okay to cry. Those are things that I didn't have from a male figure. And that I want him to understand that he's going to be able to have from myself, from his uncles, chosen and familial. He's going to be able to have those conversations with those people because so much of that intention is coming from my experience not having that father growing up.
Yeah.
It's when you said, I mean, I'll share a little bit with you. Is when I think with my dad and my mom had her choose. I'm to live with my dad. When I was 12, I had my dad remarried and I had a very, very tumultuous relationship with his new wife. And when I was 12, 13 is when my dad sort of like pushed me out of the house. And initially I went to like a furnished room in Flushing, like a SRL they're called, or the furnished room. And I was there for some time, when I entered high school, the first year of high school, and then after a while I was just doing my thing. And ended up like school found out or whatever, and they pretty much gave my dad ultimatum: either your son has to come back into the house, or he has to go become a ward of the court. And my dad ended up signing me over, and I went to foster care. And for years, and I know you said, like my dad was dead. I'm like, I told people for, I think when I was 13, 14, when I went into the foster care system, until I want to say a year before I got married, I said, oh yeah, like my dad died. And because it was a much easier conversation,
So much easier.
and then saying that, and also the fact like the shame of like, yeah, my dad sort of like, in essence, like gave me to the foster care system.
Right.
So but yeah, when you said that, I was like powerful. I was like, yeah, it's so much, those conversations are so much easier to have and say, oh yeah, he died, than explain this whole convoluted,
And I think
painful experience.
The really like, and now I can say it as like a more like informed adult, like the traumatizing portion of that for me. And what I realize is like, these are conversations that are being decided to be had by people who are 10 to 15 years old. Like they're choosing actively to refer to somebody as not existing because it's easier and less traumatic for them at that age. And it's really sad, right?
Yeah.
It's like really sad that, we haven't found a way in spaces for kids to articulate that and to find the resources to help them navigate that.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they're kind of doing it on their own. Gratefully, I think in 2025, there's so much more of a focus on mental health. There's so much more of a focus on communication and being able to express yourself. But those are resources that were a little bit limited. This is where the internet becomes a great thing.
Yeah.
Is that you can see that you're not alone. And you can see that you can create space to navigate those super challenging conversations regardless of age. But, when you think about it, it's really sad to think that, a 13-year-old is choosing to verbalize, my dad is dead.
Yeah.
Because that's easier for them. It's really sad.
Yeah. And I think I wanted to share also to like, I guess share like, yeah, like I understand it's a shared experience that I realize I think honestly, that's probably the first time I've probably told many people. I've known Brian for a long time. I don't think you knew that, right?
No, I had no idea.
I think like it's something that, like I share freely, but I feel like it's a shared experience that like, it's kind of like, oh yeah, like I felt the same way. I had the same experience. So, but thank you for sharing. And I feel like,
I appreciate that, man.
Yeah, no, of
share with you
course.
as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's I think like it's challenging. I think the challenges that we pose as like with our upbringing, our experiences, and also I think now it's getting better, but the ability to verbalize it and be okay and not feel like it's going to diminish us or diminish from our masculinity or diminish us as men. Like, oh yeah, this is a fucked up experience I had. This is how it impacted me, and I'm still struggling with it.
It's that masculine pride.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes it creates barriers around us that prevent us from healing. And gratefully, I'm a ball of clay, right? Like always trying to work towards figuring out, where those opportunities are and like learning how to be okay, sharing the parts that aren't great. Yeah. It's really easy to toot your own horn. You look at your resume, you're like, I did this, I accomplished this. Like, that's how you get a job, right? But that's not how you live.
Exactly.
On a resume, you get a job by like what your accomplishments are. But, if you don't take a moment to reflect on who you are and what got you there, you run the risk of allowing those moments to really tear you down from like developing further.
Yeah.
and sharing those stories I've learned over time is really helpful for me to like identify who I am and who I want to be.
Yeah.
100%. I think also as you know, maybe not just men, but people in general, you're always your own worst critic. And I think it's easier for me personally because I think something else I realize also is our stories and our path and our journey. I think where we all of us have sort of landed statistically isn't really the norm. I think, and that's the sad part. I was like, chances are, I know a lot of people who have very similar experiences, some better, some worse, who things didn't exactly go the way they wanted to, and they like I said, they zigged when they should have zagged,
Right.
And they didn't end up. And this is no way. I think it's something else that it's not like I'm a millionaire. I'm not like some crazy entrepreneurial success where I'm making millions. I'm just a regular, middle class dad just trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I think that's where most people land. I mean, I'm not a Jeff Bezos. I'm not crazy tech billionaire. Listen, a regular guy trying to figure it out. And that's where most people land. But even for a lot of us, is even getting to this point, statistically isn't really the norm. So it's easier. But I also know, because I'm so critical of myself, and I feel and that could be also my upbringing and my own battles with self-esteem or whatever. When I see someone else who has a shared experience and I kind of see where they're at, it's easier for them to be like a mirror back to me. Okay, I'm doing okay because this person who has this shared experiences, who I respect, who I think is doing a good job, we're sort of in the same area. We're sort of landing in the same space. And I'm all right. I was so I'm not a total fucking shithead. I'm not total.
Oh no, dude. Listen. I'll tell you, I am a huge fan of sharing experiences, like interpersonal, work wise. I'm compensation. What are you making? Because no, I'm 100% serious, man. Because I still remember I was randomly I was thinking about this 2 days ago. I remember one of my earlier jobs when I was super young. I think I was 21, 22. I was getting promoted pretty quickly in that age and working super hard. And I got promoted to open a boutique, a big boutique, a global flagship on Fifth Avenue. I got promoted to associate manager of the men's suiting floor, whatever the case may be. So I was 23. I was oh, I got this title, whatever. So I was doing really well for myself at the time. And, I remember this experience, and I was talking to some of the other managers. I had been with the company, I think at that point for probably 2 years already. I was I was 22, 23. So I had been with the company for about 2 years at the time and I already got promoted to this role. Started out as part-time. Super proud of myself, right? Think you're doing it. So I'm talking to some of the other managers, and in the casual conversation when we had gone out for drinks afterwards, somebody who was new to the company, who I was in that role was outperforming, who had a better standing. I had been with the company for 2 years. I think they had started a couple months prior. They let it slip what they were making. And at the time, it wasn't even that much, but it was they were making clearly more than me.
Yeah.
And I remember being how dare they? How
I'm busting my ass over here.
Are you crazy? And I have a reputation. The company is sending me on these trips where we're doing pop-ups throughout the country. I had been to LA, really representing. And I'm there's a clear salary gap, but because you were newer, you're paying this. So for me, that level of visibility, I'm no, let's talk about it, because I need to understand if you're killing it, all right, cool. Did I miss something along the way? Or if I'm killing it, can I give you an advice so I can reach back and, give you some pointers? And so I try to share all those tidbits, because I think when you silo yourself or you kind of hide that, it leads to people thinking, to your point, you think you're doing it, but then that comparison is the thief of joy, right?
Yeah.
It's you come up to it and you're oh, damn, I thought I would be doing that, but I'm not. And it's okay to not be able to it's okay to not have that right now, but as long as you understand where you're landing, you'll be in a much better place. So, I'm all for share it all, man.
No gatekeeping.
No gatekeeping. Let's kick down those gates, man. Let's raise each other up for real.
But it is true. I think transparency is empowering. I think in life in general, I think people, certain the powers that be, in essence, wherever they are or whomever they are, I think are able to maintain a certain level of control and kind of sovereignty over people because of lack of information, lack of transparency, because people don't know. And like you said, like people, I mean, employers do it all the time. You know, with as regards to salary, like they're all they can really care about is like their bottom line. So if they could pay someone 15% less than another person
Yep.
for doing the same job, they're going to.
Oh, I love it when I'm on LinkedIn and I look at companies posting roles, and you know the role is in like a New York or California, but they'll post it in like Texas so they can have like they can hide the salary.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
like,
Because now you got to do that. Now it's
because now it's mandatory.
yeah, it's mandatory. You got to
You have
post
to
the salary.
post the range. So I'm like, you know that it's a fully remote role, but you're posting it out of Austin. Like you're not slick. Like I know what you're doing.
That's funny.
Yeah, I see it all the time. It's crazy.
Let me propose a last question before we close up our awesome conversation. What's something you look forward to with your own kid? Something in the future?
Ooh, love that. That's a big question.
I'll start and I'll answer real quick. The one thing I look forward to in the future is showing Zachary the world. I want him to travel and I want him to experience cultures. NYC is absolutely a melting pot. I want him to discover, I want him to go to other countries and I want him to not live there, but like experience the culture, experience the locals, outside of this small city that, you contain the whole world in it, but there's so much outside of this. I want him to experience it. I think it's something that I picked up from, the Japanese family that I had hosted for a while. I think it was incredible for them to leave their like comfort and travel around the world, take their 2 kids and have them grow up, the homeschooling, but just like travel, drive across the world and see things that, probably 95% of people would never experience. And I think that's something I look forward to in the future. Just having Zachary go out there. As much as I may be worried for it, I think, I think in the same respect, I also want him to experience that. I'm like, yo, discover the world and tell me all about it.
Also, I think tonight, in case I don't think he knows the full background, but I guess Bryan hosted a family here who I guess the past couple years has spent just traveling the world.
I love that.
And I was like, it was pretty amazing when you told me their story.
Yeah,
like,
their photos right up there.
Yeah. And like they've gone to all over the world, right? Just different countries.
All over the world. They've gone to
living in RVs.
They live in the RV. I mean, I think they started in Alaska is where they purchased. They essentially sold their home. And they took whatever was in their retirement savings. They took it, they put it into a car, and they used the rest of that money sort of just to navigate. They got stuck in South America during COVID, so they were there for months at a time.
Wow.
But I think the family even picked up on a little bit of Spanish. I mean, the pictures that they have shown me, and some of them are there too, but even on their social media are things I'm just like, I don't think I'll ever be able to see that place in all my life, but they've done all of this. And it's incredible. So now they're back in Japan. I think they're in stable housing now, and their kids are in school, but they look forward to putting a documentary together of all the past years of them traveling, and they want to write a book about their adventure. Now what they're doing, they were doing talks actually for a couple of months, which was pretty cool.
Talks on like different
like they would go to like different places and talk about like their journey.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
They would do a lot of like Instagram lives and Facebook lives and all that, and I would catch them. The time difference is a little crazy, so I catch them, either in the morning or early at night. But I mean, they lived a life that I feel like really inspired me to really like just get out of my comfort zone and really like do things out there. So that's what I look forward to.
For me, I think what am I looking forward to? I think there are a lot of things that I want to do with Hunter. I want to expose him to things. I want him to be a well-rounded, well-adjusted, decent person. I think what I'm looking forward to is hopefully one day is I feel like my job will be done, and like that I feel like he's at a point where I feel confident in the person he is. I feel like I want him to thrive in whatever capacity that means, but to be like, okay, you know what? He's okay. Like he's going to be okay. I no longer have to worry about him, which is not really realistic. I feel like as a parent, you're always going to worry about your kid. But to be like, I want to feel confident enough that he's going to fucking rock it. He's going to do well. Yeah. And that's what I'm looking forward to. I think I would love to give him all the experiences I can to get him to that point, but that encapsulates so much more than, like we could be here for days just discussing all the things I'd want him to experience. But I just I'm looking forward to the point where he's confident enough in himself to venture out into the world, and I feel safe that he's strong enough and is informed enough to navigate through the world.
Yeah.
And necessarily won't need me in that way, which is like, it'll be bittersweet, but it's like but that's like what I want for him.
Yeah.
I love that. I think for Masai, I want him to be, and I'm excited to see him become a brave man. It sounds silly, but one of the things that I tell him all the time is that being brave doesn't mean the absence of fear. Being brave is having fear and still choosing to do something even when you're afraid. And so I try to remind him of that when he's like nervous about things, and I was like, bravery isn't not being afraid. Like you need to be afraid to be brave.
Yeah.
And so I think, as he grows up and he enters different environments and he starts to become a man, I want to see somebody, I want to build a person. I'm excited to see the person he becomes, because I want him to see him take on challenges that he knows is going to be super difficult and then crush it.
Yeah.
Like I can't wait for the day where he's like, yo, I'm struggling in this class, right?
Yeah.
And it's kicking my ass, but Dad, I got an A on the class. Like those moments shows kind of like the resilience of like what we're trying to teach. And it's like being able to do things that are difficult. We joke and we say, if you're not doing anything difficult, or if everything is easy, you're not doing anything that's difficult.
Yeah.
Like you're not challenging yourself. So the day when he comes home and he's like, he like crushes something and he's like, I feel proud of myself for this.
Yeah.
Forget all the external stuff. Forget my parents. Like I did this.
Yeah.
Like that's what that moment is what I'm really excited for, because I think it'll show that, all the hard work, all the focus, all the challenging conversations that we've had are really landing.
Yeah.
And then he's able to kind of like navigate those worlds that he's going to be approached with in the future.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure.
No,
tonight.
you guys are
seriously,
awesome,
man.
This is a fun chat. I didn't really know what to expect coming into it, but I said, you know what? I talk all day at work. I should be able to riff a little bit about my favorite topic, which is my son. So here we are.
Good. It makes our job easier. Nah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say thank you again, man, for popping up. We really appreciate you having here, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you for sharing and your honesty and frankness and sharing your story. I think a lot of times it's, for whatever reason, people don't really share, and you've been very forthcoming, honest, and I think that takes a lot of, you said, bravery and courage, and I think it also hopefully resonated with me, and also hopefully resonates with other people.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for having me, guys. I appreciate you.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
All right. Peace, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
See you.